Well, hello, everybody. Do you want to take a guess as to the sponsor of today's episode? That's right. You guessed it. Black Rifle Coffee. A few things that are coming up soon. I would say, first and foremost, the one that is the most important is they have a video coming up called Recoil Reloaded. It's a film about B.J. Baldwin. If you don't know who B.J. Baldwin is, he's really good at driving really fast. Now, if films aren't your thing, but perhaps coffee is, that's okay. You can still go to the same website, blackriflecoffee.com. If you're lucky, you're going to find some of their Fool's Gold coffee left, which is Irish cream flavored. I'd be surprised if by the time that you are hearing this read, it's still available, but it's worth a Google. It's worth a check if you're interested in those type of things. And you can always get all of your other coffee needs there if they happen to be sold out. I'm talking everything from beans, of course, or ground coffee, whatever you're into, to a grinder, to mugs, to things to make coffee in, pour-over kits, French press, unfortunately, vessels to drink coffee in, kettles, everything. So go to blackriflecoffee.com for all of your coffee needs. My guest today is Chad Robichaux. Chad is a former Force Recon Marine and also a DoD contractor with 8 deployments to Afghanistan as part of a Joint Special Operations Command Task Force. Chad is the founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, a nonprofit serving active duty military veteran and first responder communities around the world with faith-based combat trauma and resiliency programs. He is the co-founder of Save Our Allies, a nonprofit that's mission is focused on the evacuation and recovery of Americans and our allies and vulnerable people trapped in Afghanistan. He is a best-selling author. He's written a number of books related to veteran care and overcoming life's challenges, and also the book Saving Aziz, which brings us to our conversation today. Let's get into it, shall we? Episode number 276 with Chad Robichaux. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Dude, we did it, Mr. Robichaux.
We did.
We finally linked up.
Yep.
What happened the first time? You were planes, trains, automobiles?
This wet weather here. Apparently there's bad weather in Kalispell sometimes.
Was it here or
No.
you'd missed it was a connecting
It
flight?
was coming out of Denver. I think it was coming out of Denver. That's right.
That's my favorite. When you're trying to get somewhere, the connecting flight. I love watching, not that it's good to do, and I don't recommend anybody do this, but you start being delayed and you're tracking your own flight on the flight, trying to calculate how much time you have to make it to the next gate.
The next one, yeah. And then they give the announcement. Yeah. They give the announcement, right? If this is not if this is your final destination, just stay seated, and no one does.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've heard that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few people on board. Super tight connections. If you could just be kind and stay in your seats. And the second that the ding goes off,
300 people get
it's
up.
The running of the bulls. Like, thank you, humanity. That's all it takes, I've found, is a little bit of pressure. And people show you their real humanity right there. Yeah. And it's not as good as you might think it would be. No. It's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad, yeah. It's pretty bad.
Where would you like to begin?
Oh, gosh, man.
Fantastic book, by the way. I think I read it. Actually, take that back. This is how close I am to being done with it. Spoiler alert, you have saved Aziz.
We have saved Aziz. He's in Texas with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots.
Yeah, and the title says Saving Aziz, so I don't really feel like I'm,
It's not a big spoiler, no. But
it's, you kind of get more towards the tail end, and you were talking about your journey through, basically Pakistan and Afghanistan, the border, where you were driving in and out of it and going swimming in a river that I'm going to assume is probably just above freezing.
Yeah. I think if the water would stop, it would freeze. The Panjshir River is all ice melt.
Is it ever warm, do you think, up there?
No, because this was that was in September, the end of September, and it was it was freezing. And
but even in the summer, it can't be warm.
Yeah, I've been in the summer and been out in the Himalayas and Hindu Kush, like operating and not showering for weeks, and you get a river, you're like, I'm gonna rinse off in this river, and it's just like, I think I'd rather just stay filthy.
Well, I guess it's always snowmelt, right? In the wintertime, it's just going to load up, and in the summer times, that loaded snow is going to just barely reach a temperature where it can melt, and then you can swim in it.
Yeah.
Or not, which is the choice I would take.
Then you have the contrast of the warm summer air and that water. Yeah, it's pretty, I've opted to just wash my face and brush my teeth in the rivers before, not wash my body.
Yeah, there have been times in my life where I've just thrown away every single piece of equipment and clothing that I was wearing because it was unsalvageable.
Yeah.
And then went to the shower. Or actually, I take that back. I threw it into the garbage can in the shower and then got into it. Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, the book Saving Aziz is, there is a lot of spoilers in it, though, because there's a lot of things that I think people wouldn't assume that we would talk about. Like, this is not I think we've got a lot of credit for what we did in the rescue operation, but to me, the credit's like a speck of sand on a beach. I mean, there's just so many people that are still in harm's way because of the withdrawal. I mean, 40 million Afghans, 20 million women and little girls are going to be sexually enslaved forever because of this. We still have Americans there. We have 75,000 allies still there. So the book is like a story of achievement, but really it's a small speck in the broad spectrum of things that there's still a lot of unresolved.
I almost think that would be a good description and definition for humanity in general, though. I think there's like little specks where people can say, oh, we can be better than this, and let me go right back to being a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I'm not absolving myself in that either. I'm very capable of being a total dumbass.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it was a great read. Aziz was your interpreter overseas.
Yeah.
How would you, and this is not actually something that I've talked a lot about, I never had a relationship with an interpreter as it seems that you did, but I have worked with them, with and through them, and have talked openly about the risk that they would, just like, I'm sitting here looking like a spaceman. I got all high-speed shit. And in both Iraq and Afghanistan, without the interpreters, we would have been completely screwed. I cannot even speak the language. I can't tell the difference near or far of somebody who looks out of place, somebody who looks like they should be there. And these guys would just go – they would stay in places where I wouldn't stand if I had a ballistic shield or go knock on doors or go engage with people. And I never really got the chance to develop a relationship like you did. But maybe you can break it down in a way that people can understand the relationship that you had. And you were one of many people who probably had a relationship like this with one of the local nationals that we were fighting with. Yeah,
it's funny because you're talking about this, and this has been since the book came out, it's been a real conversation of why I never thought my relationship with my interpreter was much different, and now I realize how different it was with many interpreters. I mean, most interpreters are assigned to a unit, and so they have one interpreter for a large group of operators, and then they have and then you do that deployment, and then you come back and you have a whole different interpreter.
And that's assuming you even deploy back to the same location.
Sure.
Because we would go OIF, OEF, OIF, OEF, different people every single time.
Yeah. So for me, because my job was a little bit different, I was, as part of this JSOC task force, Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, I was AFO, Advanced Force Operator, ahead of my unit doing clandestine logistics.
Which I love that they redacted all of that in the book, and it's clearly Google searchable.
Yeah. Yeah, they redacted
some of this stuff. So in the book, and again, not a spoiler alert, and you say in the preface, I submitted this for approval, which I have heard not a single good story about that yet.
5 months it took them.
Yeah, that's actually on the shortest end that I've ever heard.
Wow, okay. That's good.
Jack Carr was saying his first one, I think, was over a year. And for clarity, that's a fiction book.
Yeah.
But the stuff that they pulled out, you can tell because the sentence reads like words we've seen and heard over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Why would you need to black that? And I love that you left it in there.
Oh, yeah. I told them I would. I'm like, I'm going to leave it. And they're like, well, we don't recommend doing that. I'm like, is it illegal for me to do that? They're like, no, so it's okay staying.
Yeah.
And it's readable. I think it doesn't like break the flow of reading. But
there's a couple of things in there like a paragraph is missing.
Yeah. I like the one with me and Aziz were in a safe house. The whole
paragraph. Then we had lunch.
But yes, I mean, so yeah, a lot of this is like means and methods and TTPs and some of those things I get, but some of it was just not necessary, and some of it, in fact, was political as well. That was not classified political, really protecting the White House because of the actions and decisions they made and withdrawal. But with my job as AFO, I really built the clandestine infrastructure to put soldiers like you on target to capture, kill bad guys. So I wasn't in my previous time I was a Force Recon Marine, but on my deployments that's not what I was doing. I worked oftentimes with one other operator who had a SEAL that I worked with, and then a lot of times I worked in a singleton capacity by myself with Aziz. And for continuity purposes, I didn't do different deployments. I did the same for 8 rotations, the same thing. And when I went back for those same continuity purposes, I was with Aziz. And so he was very trained to be able to do the job that he had to do with me. He was highly vetted, polygraphed on a regular basis, randomly, but at least every 6 months, and had access to all the same information I would, and to run these operations. And he and I would go out and we'd spend weeks, sometimes even months, out in the in the mountains of Afghanistan or across the border in the Fada region across the border to Pakistan, and we would be just the two of us. And so you did a 10-hour car ride with someone, right? You can either love them or hate them at then. And we spent plenty of 10-hour car rides together, and just spending that time together, getting to know each other. He saved my life multiple times. But like you said, as an interpreter, he didn't just save my life on these 3 specific occasions I know of, but probably every day, like, don't walk there, don't eat that, don't talk to that person. If you talk right now, they're going to kill us. Like, so, he put his life before mine constantly. Even though I had more military experience, he was the first one going around the corner. He was the first one that was going to walk into that house, like, every time. And when we were not operating, I didn't go back to Bagram, and he went home. I lived in his house. I had a house down the street from him, and I'd usually stay with him. And the first warm meal we got was made by Hatra, his wife. And I held Mashoud and Mashoud when they were babies as kids. Like, he's family to me. And so we had a very, very unique and personal relationship that I think is, like I said, I thought maybe a lot of people had this, but I'm realizing now how special a relationship I had with my interpreter, Aziz.
Do you think it would have even been possible for you to do your job without somebody like him?
No.
Or even the interpreters, like the relationship that I have. I would say it would be impossible for us to have been as effective as we were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, impossible to do. I mean, I would have been, if he cared about, a lot of people think interpreters took the opportunity to make money from the United States government. Sure, Aziz made money. He was paid well to do what he did for us.
As he
should have been, right? But he cared about, I remember having this conversation with him, I was probably 29 years old, a lot of experience. 29 doesn't sound old, but when you spend 10 years in special operations, that's a lot of life experience. And I thought I knew a lot about the world, but I'm having this conversation with this young Afghan interpreter. He's talking about freedom and democracy in a way that I never heard an American speak about it before, and how he was willing to, this was his opportunity, and he was willing to die for his daughters that he didn't even have yet, to be able to be educated, not be forced to be married, and not become sexually enslaved. And I remember thinking, like, man, this guy, like, this is something that we are so naive here about. This guy's like willing to die for something he's never even seen or experienced, but it's just innate in him to want to be free. And he was, so I think what made him unique in the fact that he really got that. He was really not just there supporting us. He was fighting for the same things we were fighting for Afghanistan. He wanted to help us because he believed in America, even though he had never been there, but he believed that, America was the good guys. But he wanted freedom for his country. So I believe he had the same ideals and same motivations that we had. And, man, what a incredibly courageous guy. I think he was the first Afghan, to my knowledge, recognized by U.S. Congress. And we made this happen for him just last month. We were, I was gonna sound like I'm taking credit for this because I was a team lead on this, but it was, I'll give like all credit to him. We were in Kabul, and we got a call that 4 team guys were caught in this. They were in this vehicle. The vehicle got stuck, and it was in the middle of this Taliban village. And if they would have sent a QRF to get them, a traditional QRF, like, they would have been. Into the hornet's nest. Yeah, those guys would have probably kicked ass and saved the day. But a lot of people would have died. A lot of civilians would have died, and the operation would have been compromised. So I got called and tasked with, hey, can you guys do a clandestine extraction of these guys? And honestly, at that time, I was like, man, how are we going to pull this off? And right away, Aziz was like, he's like, those are our brothers. Let's go get them. And he made some calls, got this vehicle that would have had permission, without saying specifics. It would have had permission to be able to go in that area, and I got in the car with him and just trusted him. And we drove all night in that area, and we scooped up those 4 guys, and no U.S. personnel were injured. No equipment was lost. The integrity of the mission stayed in play. And he was just like, man, right away he was like, those guys are our brothers. Let's go get them. He'd never met those guys before, but he was just like, that's the kind of guy he is. Isn't
it fascinating to hear? I've had conversations with individuals like that in both Iraq and Afghanistan that were supporting the missions that we were on, or just the task force or task unit in general, and listen to them talk about freedom and not necessarily freedom for themselves, but freedom for future generations, or what they want for themselves or for their family or for their country. And you come to the U.S. and I think it's because it's easy to take advantage of something that you've never really been threatened with losing or you've had your whole life. And you listen to, and I'm not judging people for complaining about the United States because there are plenty of complaints to be had. I have a goddamn list that's 12 long at a minimum of things that I would complain about. And they start largely with the government and the government's behavior. But I don't know. It's wild to hear somebody who's never experienced those things, never been to the country, and what they feel about it versus somebody who has grown up here and feels like what we're doing is the worst thing on planet Earth. Very different opinions.
He's been speaking on the book tour, and it's funny because he's like no filter at all, and he's just like,
I like this man already.
He's just like him. He's in this. We were speaking in his church, and he's just like, he did say "God damn it" in the church, and the pastor was like, "Oh," but he didn't know, you know. But he's talking. He points out all the kids. He's like, you guys need to look over your parents and tell them thank you. Like, thank you for this country. He's like, everybody says thank you to the veteran. Like, you need to thank your family. Because he's like, the other day, I went to H-E-B, which is our grocery store, to buy a cake for my son. I need to buy him a birthday cake. And I went in, and I just stopped, and I just started praising God because he's like, I went to get a cake, but there was like 40 cakes. He's like,
that's like low for an American grocery store.
He's like, you don't understand what that means. Like, he's like, I grew up like we ate no meat for a year, and then at the end of the year we had a chicken for like 20 of us, and we put it in a soup, and it was like, he's like, and you know, now I'm in a grocery store with 40 cakes to pick from, and
I truly feel that mandatory service of some kind, and I don't necessarily mean the military because I'm sure you can attest, military service is probably not for everybody. I'm glad that it's available as an option for people, but some people are tooled not well for it. But you know, there's Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, whatever, National Guard, whatever it may be. I really feel that at a formative age, and I don't have, you know, late teens, early 20s, if you gave 2 years to something greater than yourself and you had to go somewhere else and travel and get that context, I really think
it would change perspective.
It would change perspective, and I think it would be beneficial. And I don't think it would be an overnight change in this country, but I think it would be the beginning of a generational change in perspective in the way that people feel about where they live and kind of the place of the United States in the greater world.
Yeah, because I think the people that hate America, they think they authentically believe that they have a valid hate towards this country, but they just don't know the
absent context in their world. Maybe I mean, if you have one data point, and that's all you have, I mean, to you in the position in your life, that is a valid complaint. It falls apart under scrutiny and a greater and enhanced context, but I can get it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the downside of the internet. You know, they have the ability to voice that opinion as well.
Yeah.
How'd you make the shift from Marine Corps to more over on the intelligence side of the house? Because you were doing reconnaissance, which I don't want people to confuse the reconnaissance that you were doing with the work that you were doing later on. There were flavors of the same thing, but I consider it to be vastly different.
Yeah. So I went in Recon right away at like 8. You know, so I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old. I went straight to Marine Recon. Eventually got to Marine Force Recon, which is, for those who know about that, that's like usually like the top 25%. So there'll be like 4 units in a recon battalion. The letter companies, Alpha Company, Bravo Company, Charlie Company, and the Force Recon Company. It's usually guys that have been around a little longer and a little more experience, maturity, and they get a different mission profile. So I went to Force Recon. I was a free fall team leader in a Force Recon unit. So that means it's not just about being free fall; it's about doing deep reconnaissance, and actually end up doing more hey-ho like jumps than halo jumps. But you're doing
as is the way. And for people listening, that means you basically jump out and pull your parachute immediately, so it robs you of all the really fun times that happen in free fall.
In free navigate and freeze.
That is probably the most precise description I've ever heard of it. You can freeze your balls off and be staring at a GPS or a compass. Yeah,
that's about it. Yeah, so that's what I did, and then I was. I was really preparing. Well, not even really preparing. I was going on a deployment to Iraq for. We were augmenting 2nd Force Recon, and so I was getting ready to do the workup for that. And then one of my friends from CAG said, "Hey, there's a JSOC task force getting stood up, and that's going to bring in some AFOs for a unit that doesn't traditionally do that mission." So, people could read between the lines. There's multiple Tier 1 JSOC units.
Yep.
One of them, CAG, did a lot of the AFO stuff. If you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, the guy who was telling me this is a guy named Rich Cachocho, Q, and he was the character who was in the mountain bike in the beginning, pretending to be a journalist.
Yes.
So that's Q. He's a good friend of mine, and he comes up and tells me, hey, I was always infatuated with this job, and hey, there's an opportunity to do this on this task force. You could go try out for it. And so I went and did this assessment and selection, and a lot of the guys doing the training and assessment, selection, and training were CAG guys, so I kind of assumed that's who was running it, and ended up getting selected and then sent to a different unit, different JSOC unit, and did that job there. So I was like one of the original guys in 2003 that 2002 is really stood up, in 2003 that really started expanding that. I think the unit had that capacity before, but they really had never done it at that level, and so it was like one of the first guys that really stood up and expanded that capacity for the unit.
Yeah, they needed to grow and evolve at the speed of warfare for sure.
Yes.
9/11 was a kick in the teeth to everybody.
Yeah, it was. And it was a learning curve, and and I was really super. It was really cool because the command, there's a lot of competition amongst those commands, but they were like, CAG was the ones who were the experts at it, so they brought them in and let them train everybody and spin it up and do the advisory on it, and we stood up a real good program quick, and it was super effective, and got a lot of it gave us the ability to get assaulters on target. And,
so we should talk about your family's history in the Marine Corps, because it's pretty epic. You talk about it in the book.
Yeah, 84 years of military service in my family, starting from...
That's just with you, though.
Yeah, I feel that way right now. Starting with my World War II, Korea, and then my dad was the first Marine. He was infantryman in Vietnam.
What was the jobs in World War II in Korea?
It was all infantry.
Okay.
So,
Army first.
Army, both Army infantry. In fact, I just found out there's a book of my great uncle out that I got to find it, but a Robichaux, that was his unit, and he was written. He didn't write it, but it was written about him, and so I got to find this book. And so if anybody knows about this book,
that's an incredible family lineage of military service. So then
my two sons. Well,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, continues on. Are they still active?
So one of my sons did 6 years and was Afghanistan. So I did 8 to Afghanistan, and my oldest son Hunter went to Afghanistan as well. So that was crazy. That my 9th and hardest deployment. It was actually really hard on me. And right now I shouldn't say. Is this aired live right now?
No, absolutely not. This is the internet. This will come out in like 2 weeks.
Okay. So he's in.
Tell us his grid coordinate right now, Chad.
He's in Ukraine right now.
Okay.
So I'm gotten past the fact that I trust him, and he's amazing. He was an Anglico Marine, so Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company, and
very
basically
familiar.
So they usually send 4-man teams that get embedded in foreign units to give access to our U.S. air support and naval gunfire. So that's what his job was, and so. He's just super sharp. And then my youngest son, Hayden, joined and he wanted to be a firefighter. So he already went to the fire academy, but he didn't want to. At the time he graduated the fire academy, he's like, I don't think I'm ready yet. I'm going to Marines, and went to crash fire rescue, but he wouldn't get the vax. So he's one of those 10,000 that got discharged for the vax, and now they're calling him and asking him if he wants to go back in, and he's considering it.
Well, yeah, because they reversed their policy on it.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
Meanwhile, he's sitting on a other than honorable discharge and lost all of his benefits. So he's thinking about going back in to I think for him to close that chapter for our family, because he really took it hard, because he's like, I remember him calling me like, what should I do? Like, I don't want to get this shot. Like, I'm not being a baby about it. I mean, he's like honor grad at a boot camp, is at West School. He's like a stud. And he's like, but I don't want to get this shot, but or you could be mad at me because our family's history and what you do at Mighty Oaks Foundation. I'm like, man, don't worry about any of that. You make the best decision that you want to make, and I support you. I wouldn't get that damn shot.
It's an interesting position for him to be in, too, to consider going back in, because as well as I do, policy it doesn't shift on a dime.
It could shift again, right?
It could shift again.
Yeah.
I would hate to see him holding his ground, deciding to get out and thinking, okay, you're opening the door for me. I'm going to go back. And like, damn it.
Do it again, yeah.
I could see it. I don't think they would, but I don't also hold any illusions of what the military and the U.S. government are capable at this point. So growing up, was there an expectation that you would join the military, or was it just a proud military history of your family?
No, it wasn't any. In fact, I think that broke with my dad, because my dad, my dad came back from Vietnam, and our Vietnam veteran. The reason we get the care we get is because our Vietnam veterans didn't, and he didn't get the care he needed. He ended up being a alcoholic, drugs, a extremely violent man. So a lot of physical abuse in my home, fist to face physical abuse of me and my brother, and so a very dysfunctional home, and you'd have thought that would have pushed me away from the military, but in fact, the only thing I ever seen that made my dad happy and proud was the fact that he was a United States Marine, and so I was like, man, if it can make that guy happy, it was an appeal to me, and me and my brother, we started martial arts when we were 5 years old. So we were like,
which is bullshit, by the way. I started martial arts when I was 40. Let me just tell you how much I wish I had started when I was 5. Well, I see these little rubber monkeys developing their movement patterns on the mat.
Oh, they're so.
And I want to go I would never do this. But I want to go break portions of their body so they can't develop into the beast that's going to beat me in 3 years.
It's true. They learn so well. I mean, I didn't have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started in traditional Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. So that was what I grew up doing.
Okay, first off.
Grappling, yeah.
Let's talk about Judo. That's a martial art. You hit people with the earth.
Yeah.
There's a huge aspect to grappling. I was talking with, I just went down to LA and did the Fighter and the Kid with Brendan Schaub, and we were talking about, people complaining and yelling, stand them up at the UFC and get them off the cage. That used to be me.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is boring. And now I'm like, no, leave them on the cage. Definitely leave them down there on the ground.
Yeah.
You had no idea until you actually put your hands on somebody that doesn't want you to do anything, and they've been grappling for decades longer than you have, and you go, uh-oh.
Yeah. What's actually happening on the ground, how intricate that.
I had no appreciation and understanding for it now, and I actually didn't even want to watch the UFC until I started jiu-jitsu, and now I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And the striking's awesome, but I like the intricate, subtle shifts in position.
When you're engaged in that level, I did 20 professional fights. So when you're on the ground and the consequences of giving up an inch of position could be you eating elbows in the face for the end of the next round. Every inch is so methodical. You move every inch. You just feel it. You feel that the deliberateness of if you're so aware of it, and it's just if I move this, is this productive or counterproductive? It's so.
I have a new series for Dana White, and it's for you identify people at UFCs who are yelling stand them up, and then what they get to do is after that, televised of course, is to be put into that position with a trained fighter, and well, just get up.
Get up.
Just feel
Stand
the consequences, which they wouldn't understand, and then they would wake up with no teeth.
Yeah,
it's you're welcome.
I like that. I'd watch it. For
sure.
I
would watch the hell out of that, and I think people would stop yelling, "Stand them up."
When there was a show, The Average Joe, in sports, there was a sports show called The Average Joe, and
I don't know, but I want to watch it if there was.
Armchair quarterbacks for football would go out with a professional football player and
just get tuned up. That would be spectacular.
Yeah, they should be that for fighting.
Is your father still alive?
No, he died at 63. And we had a pretty estranged adult relationship, but in the last years of his life, though, he became invalid, and I stepped back in his life and really reconciled with him. I ended up, I'm a strong Christian, so I ended up being able to lead him in his faith, and just, he died in not in the best circumstances, but at least we had that reconciliation between us, and he never said he loved me or was apologetic
ever in his life.
But at the end of his life, I gave him this cell phone, and he would just call me, and he would just call me crying, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, I'm sorry. And then I'd say, okay, and then he'd hang up, and then 5 minutes later, he's calling back because he didn't remember the last conversation. So it was real subconscious, I think, because he had a lot of regret in his life. But it was really, I felt a lot of peace when he died, and unfortunately, he just never, I don't think he ever recovered from his time in Vietnam.
After or before your reconciliation with him, how did you navigate the impact of that abuse and that early on, interactions with him throughout your adult life?
Yeah, I never realized at the time, but looking back now, where I'm at in my life now, and I feel like I'm in a much more mature, wiser place now. Looking back, I feel like a lot of my everybody talks about people in psychology talk about father wounds and stuff like that. I think a lot of my success, unfortunately, came from a desire to prove something to myself, which would have probably been trying to prove something to my dad to earn, even though I didn't have access to my dad because he was always estranged in a way, but always just trying to I was never content. So I was never content with winning a martial arts competition or winning a tournament or
always the next thing.
It's always the next thing. I'd make it to Recon. That's not good enough. What's next? force. Okay, I want to do more. I want to do, like, it's never enough. There's always the next thing. And I remember one time I was on an interview, and the guy was reading my bio, and he like read my bio from beginning to end. And I like literally, because you remember, I want to crawl under a table. And he's like, man, this is such an amazing, like, you lived such an amazing life. Like, how does it make you feel to hear all these things? And I'm like, embarrassed. Like, it sounds like you're reading a bio of a discontent person. And I just came to this realization, like, my whole life had been just like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the things that you or I did were like great things, and you should be passionate and ambitious and want to achieve great things. But the motivation behind it for me, I believe, looking backwards now in my life, was a lot of it was just like this empty hole inside of me that I was just trying to fulfill with accomplishments and achievements, and it's never good enough, and I never found contentment. And
did you find satisfaction in the accomplishments, or was it fleeting and you were on to the next?
It was fleeting and on to the next, and it felt good in the moment, right? But then you're like, what's next? Like, I have to achieve more, and it's part of the competitive nature from the environments that we worked in, but I think a lot of us from those communities are probably driven for the same things, as this ambition for achievement, but it's never quite satisfying enough. And thankfully, I'm not in that place now. My identity's not in that job and those achievements anymore. I think my faith has really been a big part of that, becoming a Christian and having that, solidifying my faith in something eternal and not in this world. But I still have a very driven personality. It's just the motivations aren't the same. And I have a lot of content and peace now with, I think my life now is more about serving other people. And you always say that in the military, like, I'm here to serve. But a lot of those things, like,
you're serving yourself at the same time too.
At the same time, right?
Because you're the one receiving the accolades for those accomplishments and achievements. And look at this pin that I have now. Look at this stupid $2 ribbon that means nothing.
Yep. Yeah. So I think I've transitioned past that to where, like, my joy and satisfaction comes out of, like, serving others. And do you feel that the relationship you had with your father when you were young, did that shape and form the relationship that you have with your sons? Oh yeah, 100%. I remember. I didn't write about it in this. I think I wrote about it in my book, An Unfair Advantage. I wrote about this whole story with my dad in that book, An Unfair Advantage. But I remember my son Hunter going to boot camp. And my dad called, and my son Hunter's like, was born an adult. He's like one of the most mature, like, people I know.
He's 35 like, going on 17.
Yeah, he's like Benjamin Button. But he was always like, all my friends were his friends, so he grew around all soft guys and on the mats. And like, I remember him like at 12 years old teaching a double leg to like adults, like in a room full of 50 people. He's just like always had this real confidence and about him and just real maturity. His character is like something I look up to even right now. Like, he's the most character of anybody I know. And I'm not saying it as a dad. Like, that's just like man to man. He's like one of the most incredible people I know. But I remember him going to Marine Corps boot camp and my dad telling me, "Oh, okay, they're going to make a man out of him." And I was like, "No, he's already a man. Like,
already accomplished."
Yeah, they're going to make a Marine out of him.
Yeah,
but the identity of manhood is not in being a Marine. And,
even beyond that, did I don't know how you are with your kids. I'm probably over affectionate with mine. Like, I tell them I love them probably more than they would like to hear. Like, my daughter works at a coffee shop, and I'm like, hug her all the time. I tell her I love her. Every time I leave my kids, whether I'm going to the grocery store or I'm on the phone or even text messaging, it's always I won the lottery with my parents, for clarity. Like, the situation you're describing is horrendous and also far too common.
Yeah.
But what I've seen is that well, I guess there's two ways that you could take it. One is you could generationally pass that down and become the person that used to abuse you, or you go the other path and you're like, I'm never passing this on to my kids again, and you generationally break it.
Right.
And it sounds like you did the latter.
Yeah, and I battled with that because when I dealt with the anxiety, depression, started having panic attacks, my instinct was almost to go back to that behavior and be like a tyrant to my family. And luckily, I spun out of that, in a short period of time. But I definitely battled with almost becoming that same person. But the recognition of it and then being intentional about reversing it. And like you said, man, with my kids, like my sons have beards, and I kiss them goodnight.
Yeah, my kids are like, get away from, shut up, Dad. Yeah, okay. My friends are here. I'm like, oh, well, I love them too. Yeah,
but my son's the same way. Like, we're on a group thread right now for this mission in Ukraine, and he's like, hey, love you, Dad. Like, we got a bunch of we got like 10 soft guys on there. We're like, hey, I love you, man. Like, praying for you.
But what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, people will look at it and they're like, I mean, that's just who we are. Well, like I said, he's a full grown man with a beard and I give him a kiss like on the lips because he's it might sound funny to people, but like I grew up in Southern Louisiana, like a lot of affectionate culture, but I grew up with this hard dad, and I'm like, man, I want my kids to know I love them.
Yeah.
Like we've seen, you know, how temporary this life could be.
I was going to say, we don't know. You never know. You just don't know when you're going to check out. And I would love to, whenever that happens.
They need to know.
They need to know. And I don't want them to have any question or any doubt. I'd rather overload on the affection than have any of my children think, what, you know, I wonder if dad did fill in the blank, fill in the blank. There's no doubt for sure in a level of embarrassment, which now I take pleasure in said embarrassment. So it's perfect.
My dad never talked about, my dad had a lot of failures, but he never talked about them. And I think a lot of times parents talk about their successes with their kids and teach them how to, you know, follow their path to success. But parents don't talk to their kids about failures.
I don't know if you can talk to I agree with you, and I actually don't think there's a lot of value in talking to people about your successes because what's to be learned by that?
Yeah.
And so I have 3 kids. I have 2 boys and a girl, and they could not be more different between the spectrum of the 3 of them.
Yeah.
In every level of humanity. 1, I wouldn't necessarily want them to follow the path that I did. 2, I don't consider myself to be successful. But if they were to pick any one aspect and say, hey, Dad, how did you do this?
Yeah.
Me telling them step by step by step how I did it, I don't think prepares them for the decisions that they need to make along the way on their own anyway. The lessons in failure sure do, though.
Yeah.
And also letting them fail with boundaries. You know,
yeah, you don't want to.
I don't need to throw them off a cliff, but with boundaries.
Let them stumble. Yeah, I mean, just telling your kids about like, hey, let me tell you about a time that I tried something, you know, bold and adventurous, and I fell on my face, and
oh, by the way, that was last week. So take notes.
Exactly. And this helping them learn from those lessons. There's a lot of, you know, we are where we are because the lessons we learned through those hardships.
Yeah.
Sometimes instead of letting them relive them, we could share our lessons with them, and I've done that a lot. I'm wondering why you have Black Rifle coffee cup and I have Hilton. I'm advertising Hilton Garden Inn.
That's not true. We'll crop that right out because we just opened a Black Rifle Coffee 2 blocks away.
Exactly.
And I didn't even have time to go get it. I was at an architectural meeting. I zipped over, but I'm going to fix it soon. So Mike Glover, I wonder if I can even say this. Sorry, Mike, if I can't. He has Fieldcraft Survival Water. So pretty soon that's going to sit here and live on the table too. And then Michael usually gets the guest coffee. Mm-hmm. I mean, today... He didn't even ask if anybody wanted
my
coffee.
game today.
Yeah, my cold Hilton Garden Inn
so
coffee.
You're fired, Michael, but you can be back on staff immediately. So, yeah, it is what it is. What were your thoughts about your sons when they expressed the desire to join the military?
I was excited. I think
no hesitation.
My son Hunter, I knew he was going to be a Marine from like 3 years old. So I mean that was no surprise. Hayden, they were just 2 totally different kids. I'm like, it's going to be really good for him.
Yeah.
And so I was excited for that too. But Hunter. Where I wasn't concerned about joining the Marines. I was concerned about what he wanted to do for a job, and because I think a lot of people join the military and they don't think about what they're going to be doing every day, and you know, like it's a great concept for young people to join the military. But I always tell them like, what do you want to do when you wake up every day? Because that's going to be a difference whether you love it or hate it.
It's
and that's
very
not the
important.
same answer for everyone. That's a different answer for everyone. Not a lot of people like to be sitting in the freezing cold water every day, and not a lot of people like to be sitting behind a warm, cozy office every day. I couldn't do it. So you got to know what you want to do every day. And so that was the real thing with Hunter is like, I know he's like, you know, pretty driven like me. So I'm like, let's pick the job. Let's sit down and think about this and pick the job that's going to be right for you. And right away, he's like, well, you're a Recon Marine, so I want to be a Recon Marine. I'm like, you know, I'm okay with that because he's like, you know, high school wrestler and swim and all the things that, you know, and he's smart. So I'm like, let's really look at it. So that's what we sat down and looked at everything that he wanted to do. And he was like really interested in the JTAC side. He's like, he loved aircraft. Yeah. And so I'm like,
it's a great skill too.
Yeah. I'm like, man, Marine Angliclo, like no one knows about it. And it's a great job. You know, great job field, and you're going to get to work with people he loved. He's always had this adventure for different parts of the world, different cultures. I'm like, you're going to get to work with different cultures, and right away, like he's like 18 years old, and he's with the South Koreans, like calling in air for the South Koreans, and he went to Canada and worked with the Canadian Special Forces, and then he went to he went with the Georgians and with the Georgian infantry, did a workup, and then deployed to Afghanistan, embedded with the Georgians. So
that's wild.
Super. In 2018, when no one was doing kinetic operations anymore, he was out. Actually doing, he was
controlling
kinetic
air.
combat, controlling air. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's crazy how valuable that skill set is. Most people don't understand what it actually takes to get ordnance released off an aircraft, at least in the modern era, because let me tell you, 2002, 2003, it didn't take much.
Right.
Like, whoa. I didn't say drop all of those, but thank you. Let's back it off just a little bit. I didn't say the entire city block, but also that was awesome. Yeah, it was wild. So what was it that got you to stop doing what you did in the military?
I would have not want to, even if I lost a limb. I would have still continued wanting to do what I was doing. I had switched from active duty to contractor. I stayed at my
doing the same role.
My unit, like I would have had to rotate out, and my unit wanted me there. I didn't want to leave, so they offered me a direct contract to stay at the command, which the command, that's very common.
Yep.
And so I got to stay, and but what I didn't realize I was doing was forfeiting like any kind of military care if something went wrong.
Oh, that's not a part of the. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, so I
guess I had kind of just assumed if you were a direct contract, you would have had access to those systems.
Not the VA system. Not the like. I couldn't have went back to like a wounded warrior battalion the Marine Corps has or something like that, or like you guys are the command would probably keep you there as a team guy and
maybe
take care of you. I don't know.
maybe not. Yeah. Hard to say.
Yeah. So for me, there was a compromise in our operation. One of our guys flipped over to the Taliban and basically compromised our operation.
Provided a bunch of intel on you and the guys, And
I don't know if you had heard about this or remember this, but 12 of our guys were rolled up, 2 Americans, 10 Afghans that were in our program. The Afghans were tortured and killed. And
I do not remember that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you more off air.
Okay, yeah.
But so those guys were killed, and that led to a couple of things. One is I was in a neighboring country, and so I was first of all, my house in Afghanistan, they drove a V-bit into it, leveled it.
Generally not a good sign.
No, all of our people were luckily not in the house. We had a guard there, but
how quickly after this guy flipped did these things start happening? I'm just curious the speed with which they were able to move with
about 2 weeks, within about 2 weeks.
So they actioned it pretty quick.
Yeah. And but the guy, so I'll tell you more about the guy specifically and why that happened so fast. But yeah, the V-bit in our house, Aziz was identified. And so he had to move his family. And then the other thing was I was in a neighboring country, and so that neighboring country's intelligence agency rolled me up. So I was essentially abducted by this intelligence agency. Had a pretty hard interrogation, and then thankfully released. And then our command caught the guy, caught him, and when they caught him, he had like months of like Chad sleeps here. This, even though we're deviating routes and times, like here's routes and times, there's their patterns for routes and times, like here's where their safes are.
He was fully gathering intelligence on you guys.
Yeah, and so it wasn't just like maybe he was compromised and it started like he was collecting on us, and he was like a OGA trained dude that was putting out a program, a former Northern Alliance guy, a guy that I had worked with, like a guy that I had been out in the mountains with, like me, another team guy, Aziz, and this guy. His name's Bashir. I write about him in the book.
Do you think he always had the intention to flip, or did they get some leverage on him?
I don't know. I would imagine leverage on him because, like I said, I'd operated with him before, and he was like, man, he was a gangster. Like he was like, he was like,
maybe he was the best actor in the world. Because you got to think what it would be a play that you and I would make if we were developing a source network. Like,
sure.
Hey, maybe you should go work with these guys and get as much information as you can. Those are the fascinating questions to me.
The fact that he made it all the way through that OGA program was like pretty. So he did get, but he got arrested, got sent in Bagram jail, eventually to Polacharki. He was in Polacharki, and then somehow he went to the jail in Saudi Arabia. And then 2011, when Obama did a big release, he was released. And so that's
awesome. I wonder what he's up to now.
Well, he went back to the Taliban. And then we know specifically, like in April of 2021, Aziz is like, Bashir's back. He's looking for me. That he knew my name. He was looking for me. So in April, I mean, the withdrawal was in August. In April, we had already knew to start moving. So Aziz started moving on the run in April because of this guy. And so
this guy's probably still alive.
No, for sure. He's
That's
still
very unfortunate.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a nice 10-digit grid and perhaps a JDAM for him.
Yeah.
God, that is rough, man.
Yeah. So that was so when you asked why I left, like I was pulled out I went to another country. I didn't come back home, and I was given a brief on all this. And obviously the operation's compromised, but we had some big fish on the radar, and so I'm leading this big operation, and they're like pretty much put it on me, like, hey, obviously if you don't want to keep going, like, no brain, like, obviously
it's your choice.
It's your choice. And man, I'd already spent like almost 4 years investing in this operation. Like, I just felt like I got to keep going, and so I went back, and when I went back, man, I was not in a good place. I remember going back and like my whole body went numb, my arms went numb, my face went numb. I was scared. I mean, I hate to say that, but like, it's hard for me to say that, but I could say it now. Like, I was scared. I went back. I'm going to this country. I'm flying in this country by myself.
Yeah.
With no support, knowing that I'm compromised, and the wheels flew off, man. I did one more operation. I like came back from this operation, and I like felt like I couldn't even remember what happened. So I just spoke up and said, I basically said, hey, I need to go. I got on the phone because I'm like, somebody's listening. I got on the phone and said, I need to fly to Dubai to go to a doctor because it was kind of like a signal, like, hey,
yeah, you said the right thing at the right time, and they knew what you actually meant.
Yeah, and so when I left, I bought a round trip ticket. I just had a backpack. I left a lot of money and all my stuff in a safe, and I mean, a lot of money in a safe and all my stuff. I flew, and I was like, have you ever seen that movie Argo? And he's like,
yes,
they're like clock's ticking. That's how I felt in an airport. I'm like, they're not going to let me. Every police officer is here for me. They're not going to let me out of this airport. My plane was leaving late, which is typical in international. But for me, I felt like they're holding it. It was terrible. And when I got to the other country, we got to Dubai. I thought, I just got to get to Dubai. I remember thinking like I could barely breathe. Like I felt like I was, and I just having a panic attack. And I remember thinking like if I could just get to Dubai, and they get to Dubai, and then they're like just sit tight, and I'm like gonna die. Like I felt like physically I was gonna die. I called my grandmother, who's like my mom. I called my wife. I wasn't supposed to call anyone, but I did. And then my wife freaked out. She like called my grandmother to come to the house. My wife's like flying to Dubai. The unit sent someone over to my house to make sure my wife didn't do anything wrong, and left me there for like 4 days. I'm sure now they were doing like a, probably CI deal. Yeah. And then I flew back, and when I flew back, man, like the whole gamut, like polygraphs, CIA interview. Yeah. And then after all that was over, I went to see a clinical psychologist, and they diagnosed me with PTSD, basically said I was having a breakdown. And then I was done. I was read out of my program. And that was it.
Left to your own devices. I actually think, you said it's hard for you to sit there and say that you were scared. I think it's one of the most essential things that people need to hear.
Yeah.
There's this narrative or belief that the people who do what you used to do or are in the special operations community are somehow superheroes.
Yeah.
Like bullets just bounce off of them, and the things that you are asked to do or the things that you choose to do or the environments that you are exposed to, like you're just Teflon, and it bounces off you. Yeah. That has been the exact opposite experience for me. I actually don't ever want to work with anybody who is not afraid of something, because to me, that just says, oh, you're a sociopath.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous shit, man. You were out there on the front leading edge by yourself in countries that if they knew what you were actually doing, might have wanted to chat with you about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean an electrical battery hooked up to your balls.
Yeah.
Or nipples at the same time. I don't know what you're into, so who knows what you would have asked for.
Sledgehammers to the feet.
Totally.
Yeah.
To begin with, before the pliers come out.
Yeah.
It's...
Yeah, and those are the things that were going through my head, actually, too.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't thinking about getting killed. Like, people think, oh, you were scared of, like, getting killed. No, that would have been okay. Like, I mean, obviously no one wants to die, but I was thinking about being, stuck in the basement of a prison.
Yeah, I'm going to die, but it's going to take 18 days because they're going to medically keep me alive while they remove my eyelashes and eyebrows and eyelids and then my nails and teeth. Yeah, like I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
My theory is if somebody wanted to torture me, I would just start making stuff up. Like the nuclear launch codes, get a pen and paper, right? It's
here it comes.
4, 7... the @ symbol. I have no interest in that shit whatsoever. Yeah, that's the first time you felt those type of psychological or physiological symptoms?
I had them creeping up before. Like
I personally believe they're cumulative. Like they build up over time.
It was, and I didn't want to say anything when it first started happening. I remember like one time my arms went numb, my cheeks felt numb, and I'm like, So we got into the internet and I started researching. I was in this village and they were eating like these apricot seeds, and they had the like trail mix of apricots and they have apricot wine, so I'm like trying to figure out what I ate, and I'm trying to use.
Can apricots kill you?
Yeah, and I found out that apricot seeds are poisonous. I'm like, that's it. I'm not stressing out. I'm this apricot seeds
in a wheelbarrow-sized serving.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like trying to justify everything else, but I didn't want to say anything. You know, if I would have said something like at that time, those years, the guys would have thought I was weak. And you'd have been pushed out because that's what I would have thought. And so I was like ashamed to say anything. And then if I went to mental health, I was on TSSCI and it's the SAP program. Like I'd have been read out just like what ended up happening. And so I didn't want to say anything. And I just tried to, I could suck it up and push forward. And I did for a little bit. But then there was like these moments where I remember this one moment to where I was like, I was in the fodder area and I was like kind of like on this kinetic operation. I was like basically trailing the guys, and I was like almost like a video game. Like I could see myself almost bird's eye view, and everything was like living a little delayed.
Oh wow!
And it was like, it was like I didn't really aware of it at the time, but then I had this moment like where I was like almost coming out of like a buzz of being drunk, and I was like, man, like what just happened? What was going on with my mind? My mind like felt like just really off. And that I had that happen like several times. And I know that now it's called disassociation, where your mind feels like it's separating from your body under extreme stress. And I think it just, the more time I spent by myself, in that singleton capacity, in that environment to where knowing that I had no body that was going to come and get me.
Yeah.
Like I was out in an area called Gulmit, Pakistan. Mm-hmm. It's like really like what you got where the Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Himalaya mountains meet, the three biggest mountain ranges in the world. Absolutely beautiful, but it kind of gives you this perspective of vastness, how remote you are. Like these giant mountains, kind of like probably here, but these probably be
not like really here.
These are like foothills to that, right? And so like I'm just thinking like, and then it hit me like, oh my gosh, like my unit is in Bagram Air Force Base, the next country over.
Yeah.
No one knows I'm here. I have no comms with anybody. Like there's no immediate comms. If something happens, like
you're on your own.
I'm on. And I remember like, maybe I was naive to it before. I don't think I was, because I was a pretty mature and seasoned guy, but like, it was just the reality of it hit me. And that reality like of it hitting me like really started putting me in a bad place. Like I think it was, like you said, it was cumulative. It started creeping in. That fear starts creeping in, and it becomes like corrosive to you. And I
think it adds up an ounce at a time until you have a ton of bricks on your shoulders, and at some point it achieves a weight if you don't do something about it, where it's just going to crush you.
Yep. And I wasn't going to say anything about it.
So what'd you do once you got out? Once you were done?
Man, so I get out and I'm trying to figure out something to do, and my wife and my counselor talked to me. I didn't like the medication. It made me feel like I was dying. I felt like it was poisoning me, or the other medication he gave me made me feel like a zombie. I was, again, embarrassed. These panic attacks were debilitating. Like, I believed I was going to die at any moment. And so my wife and my counselor were trying to find something to, like, snap me out of it. And they talked me into getting on those mats and doing jiu-jitsu. Honestly, I didn't want to do anything physical because I felt like I was on the verge of heart attack. So if I ran, which I was big into running at the time, I'd run like 60 miles a week. I stopped running.
You thought your heart was just going to explode?
I thought my heart was going to explode, or jiu-jitsu. But the doctor's like, you will be fine. You love this. I always say when I'm speaking, I did jiu-jitsu since I was little, but I'm still little. Yeah. Like, I did it my whole life. And so he's like, you're going to be fine. And at that time I was already fighting professional MMA. I was doing it on the side between deployments, which is crazy, but the competition wasn't as stiff back then. And so I got on those mats and I felt like I found a cure. I mean, you can't think about Afghanistan and while you're doing jiu-jitsu, your buddy's going to beat you up. So
I was going to say you can, but it's not going to go your way.
You got to be you got to be mentally present, and that's what I love about jiu-jitsu. But you could have a medicine for being sick, and you could abuse that medicine. So I took this thing that was good for me, and I abused it. I really believe in these like 4 pillars the military talks about of resiliency, like resiliency and recovery, like mind, body, spirit, social, like being mentally tough, having good mental health, good physical health, having a strong spiritual foundation, socially surrounding yourself with the right people. I think jiu-jitsu covers some of those. Mm-hmm. But I took all of this all this stuff I was dealing with, and I used jiu-jitsu as a place to hide from it instead of actually getting well. Like some people climb into alcohol or drugs. Like I spent 24/7 on those mats, opened the gym, had like 1,000 students in my school. So I was immediately successful again. I started fighting and I was winning fights. I was like on the surface now I'm building those accolades back up. I'm, not weak anymore. I'm tough again. I'm building this facade. I ended up winning, fought in Strikeforce and fought for in Bellator and World Series of Fighting and all these big shows, and won the Legacy belt. And so I think at one time my highest rank was number 6 in the world as a flyweight, number 15 or so as a bantamweight. So like on the surface it looked like super successful, but man, underneath that I was still like very broken inside. I was still dealing with panic attacks. I wasn't sleeping at night. My marriage fell apart. I was like a tyrant to my wife. I was like yell at her because I was just so frustrated with everything. So I yell at her, like slam doors, break things, punch holes in the wall, going down that path my dad went. Yeah. And I never put my hands on them, but I was just like not a nice guy. And I remember like I talk about this a lot because it really just stings me, but coming like when I was first started dealing with this, my daughter's having this birthday party and she was like so excited, like dad was gonna be home for her birthday, and she's super opinionated and something super stupid. She didn't like the icing on her cake, and I picked up my little girl's birthday cake and threw it against the wall and like destroyed my little girl's birthday.
Jesus.
Yeah, like I remember like what kind like I just lost it, like what kind of like I remember thinking like what kind of dad behaves that way, and I was just out of control, so I just distanced myself from them. Like and I was unstable.
My wife teaches jiu-jitsu just down the road, and she has talked about it. She's been in it now. I think she gets her 3rd stripe on her black belt next year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, she's awesome. So, and that's how we met, was through jiu-jitsu. But she talks about people who use it as a coping mechanism. Exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
Because you could go 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. Let's say you do a class and then an open mat right afterwards. Say like 6 total hours of training. It is fantastic, right? You're going to get a workout, you're going to get a mental challenge, you're solving puzzles and all this stuff, and then you just go back and you just live your life.
Yeah.
And she has examples of people that she's seen, and also she'll talk about it from herself where, things weren't going necessarily great in her life, so what did she do? Double down the amount of time that she was spending. And it becomes an escape that you can say to people, well, look at how much time I'm spending doing this.
Right.
But at the end of the day, all you're doing is actually avoiding what you need to do.
Yep.
Yeah, she completely agrees with the assessment that you gave, for sure.
And it was about 3 years of that for me before eventually.
That is a long time.
Eventually you crash, right? Because you're not getting and I just kept more busier and busier and more. Like I said, I didn't want to be at home to behave that way towards because I knew that was obviously very inappropriate, to be that way to my wife and kids. So I just stayed busy as I could, and I signed up for another fight. So now my mind's focused on a fight. Yeah. Didn't have to focus on the problems, and but eventually, I ended up, this dead marriage. So I walked out of into a relationship with other women. My wife and I separated. We filed for divorce. Sold our home and moved into 2 separate apartments for 12-month leases. So we were pretty committed to, going separate ways. And about 3 months apart before I ended up in 2010, I attempted to take my life. And
how did it get to that place where you landed at taking your life was the most reasonable solution? Or maybe reasonable is not actually a good descriptor of that. It was a viable solution for you.
Well, no, I think for me it felt like the reasonable solution, because I and it wasn't anything about me. Like for me, I was like, I don't have to deal with this woman anymore. Now I could be free of this. But it was the damage I was causing them. Like I thought separating from them would relieve them of the burden of me, but it didn't. It made it worse. So I'm destroying their lives, and my wife's like an amazing woman. Like she's like. And my kids are like, obviously I love my kids, and I'm like, I'm destroying their lives. So the best thing for them is for me not to be in the equation. So this thought came over me that maybe my family would be sad without me. But the reasonable thing, like you said, was they'd be sad without me, but they would be better off.
Was that a recurring thought, or does that hit you like a wave one time and then you almost action that?
It hit me. It hit me one time. I was when we first separated, I signed up for this big fight on Strikeforce. It was on Showtime. It was
of course. You need to have another goal.
Yeah, I hadn't had another goal. And so the whole time we're separated, I'm training for this fight, and I win this fight. I remember being in that ring, and like 10,000 people were screaming, and I remember it was like a Rocky fight. Like every round, me and Humberto knocked each other down. It was like back and forth. Tim was fighting that night. Tim Kennedy fought Jacare that night, and then I remember when they were announcing the winner, everything kind of got quiet, like 10,000 people screaming in the Toyota Center, but everything got quiet. And I remember thinking, like, of all these people here, none of them was Kathy. She had been in my fights before, and that thought made me realize, like, man, like, I just fought so hard for the stupid win on a record, but meanwhile, I'm not fighting for the most important things in my life. And I walked up that ring that night, and I went home by myself in my apartment. I stopped by the after party. Ranger Up had an after party for me and Tim. And I stopped by and I was like, didn't want to be there. I just went home, and I remember laying in that bed, and that's when that thought hit me. Like, maybe they'd be sad without me, but they'd be better off, and I'm going to take my life. And then after that hit me, like, I couldn't escape that thought. That was, like, to me, that was the most reasonable thing I needed to do. And I couldn't, from that moment on, I couldn't escape that thought. I was convinced myself of that. And I was not going to tell anyone because I didn't want anyone to intervene. I didn't want to, like, make a cry for help. And so I had a Glock 22 pistol, and I'd literally would put my family pictures on the floor around me, in my apartment closet, and try to build up the courage to pull that trigger. But one of the things that would happen is every time I put that gun to my head was I would see it play out, like, who was going to find me.
Yeah. Because
I would, like, somebody's going to hear the gunshot. I don't know why I would just play it out. I actually believe it was a divine thing that, like seeing this play out, but either somebody's gonna hear the gunshot, I'm gonna show up missing, or morbidly, like, I'm gonna start stinking, like someone is gonna find you. And the only other person that had a key to my apartment at the time was my oldest son, Hunter. He was 13, and I thought, like, man, I can't have my son be part of that, finding me that way. And there's one in 3 children from parent that commit suicide do it as well.
It's unbelievable how it generationally passes on.
Yeah.
I actually know a few examples of people from exactly like that, and you would think that somebody who had found somebody who had killed himself, it would be the last burden they would want to put onto somebody else. And I don't think they want to put it on there. No. But the math on that is wild.
Well, you remember Ronda Rousey? She always talked about how much she was, like, how heavy it was for her father killing himself. And she talked about, like, how, she spoke against suicide, everything. She's on top of the world. She loses to Holly Holmes, her world title. She goes in Ellen DeGeneres, and they said, what's the first thing that happened when you went home? She said, I want to kill myself. Right? Because she lost the world title belt. Like, even though she spoke against it, it became the one that her dad taught her, this is the answer to when you're in your lowest point.
Such a burden.
It is. And so like, knowing that, I was like, pump the brakes, but I was still in such a dark place. I felt like it was the right thing to do. And it was one morning I was in that closet, and I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't going to answer it. But when I heard Kathy's voice announce herself, my wife, I like panicked. I mean, she would never came into my apartment or in my closet, but I hid that gun under a blanket. And
what were you doing in the closet, weirdo?
Well, you know why? You know why? This is a shame to say, but I had set up this bachelor pad. And obviously girls are going to come over and stuff. And I had put, it's disgusting and a shame to say, but I'm just being honest. Like, I had put all my family pictures on the shelf in my closet, instead of having family pictures out in my living room and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't think that's uncommon for people who are choosing to live that particular lifestyle.
Yeah. And so that's why I was there putting those, and I peeled those pictures off and put them on.
All right.
That's why. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you're in a gimp suit in the closet. I don't know what you're into, Chad. I don't know what you're up to. Yeah. How did you finally beat that thought?
Well, when my wife came and I went to the door, we got in this big argument. I was so mad that she was there interrupting me killing myself, which sounds twisted.
How dare her?
Yeah, exactly.
How rude.
I was like, I remember so mad, like, she's in, and I'm yelling at her, and she's not a very calm arguer, but she was in this moment. And she asked me, she's like, how could you do all these things? Like, we met when we were 17 and 18. So she saw me go to, Recon school. And,
she saw it
all that stuff, and training for fights. And she's like, how could you do all of this? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit.
Damn, that's a tough question to sit with.
Yeah, there's no more soul cutting word to me than to be called a quitter. And she was right. I've been successful at professional things, being but when it came to the most important things, like being a husband and a father, and I quit, and including my own will to live. And so I'm a pretty radical decision maker, and I made a decision at that moment just to get back in the fight. And a lot of things that helped me in that recovery process. But one was this man stepped into my life and began to mentor me and led me to my faith, became a Christian, and started giving me this, like, discipleship, and really teaching me that, I'm still dealing with anxiety, depression. I still get angry, but I can make better choices in response to those things.
Yeah.
And that's really the Bible had taught me how to do. And so being intentional about that led me to restoration, led me to hope again, and ultimately gave me a renewed sense of purpose. And that purpose was manifested in me having a deep burden in my heart to help other veterans. And we started Mighty Oaks Foundation. And in the last 12 years, I've been able to speak to over 500,000 active duty troops in our resiliency program. We spend about $5 million a year in our recovery program, where we have 5 ranches around the country that we send Virginia, Ohio, Texas, California, and we send active duty service members, veterans, first responders, spouses. We pay for everything, including travel, to go to our 1-week recovery programs. And we've had about 4,500 graduates in 12 years, but we do about 1,000 per year now.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty
radical
big
acceleration. Yeah.
And we've worked on a lot of veterans policy, really for faith-based programs, and regardless of people believe in or Christians like I am or not. I think every veteran, regardless of people's opinion on faith, every veteran deserves the right to be able to choose between clinical or faith-based programs. They should have that freedom to be able to choose. And
it's one of the most beautiful things about the world that we live in is that choice.
Yeah, so we've been big advocates for that and been pretty successful on some policy in D.C. to get those things back in place. And then our last thing we do is our international program. We take the same successful things at Mighty Oaks that we do for our service members, and we help equip our allies and partners around the world. And we've been doing that since 2016. And right now, I've been to Ukraine 10 times since February. So we do a couple of things. We've done some rescue operations. I was on the rescue operation for Benjamin Hall, the Fox News reporter, and then recovered the body of Pierre. We just recovered a team guy's body.
I heard about him.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he just got home a few days ago. His body just got, so we recovered that body for the family. And we were trying to move him alive, but our State Department's monsters and made a lot of problems.
Time to time. Yeah.
But and then we do a lot of mental and spiritual resiliency training for the frontline troops. So that's the kind of things we do internationally.
How long was it, from that moment when your wife knocked on the door, and I'm glad she challenged you with the question that she did, until you felt like you were out of the woods and you didn't have that lingering thought about ending your life?
Yeah. I like I said, I'm a pretty radical decision maker. And so that kind of snapped me out of that mindset. But I think I still battled with that. When I would hit these low times again, I would still battle with that urge. It's really weird. It's almost like if I had a bottle of pills next to me, sleeping pills, I could just grab them and just take them all. Right now, if I have a gun, if all I have to do is just pull the trigger and it's done. When you're on the roof, I just have to step. That was still lingering. And I'd say probably about a year before I finally shook that.
Damn.
That lingering and it wasn't all the time like it was before. It was just in those moments of because obviously bringing my family back together with as much hurt as I caused, specifically with my wife, there was some turbulent moments. Which
should be expected.
Yeah, I mean, I made a decision. I'm going to allow her to throw things back in my face. I'm allow her to hurt. I'm allow her to express all these things that I did to her, because if I fight back in it, it's going to keep spinning forever. So I'm going to allow her to have as long as she takes to vent back to me, because she needs that. And I had good wisdom and counsel on that. So there was times where I'm trying to love back on her, and she's just disgusted by me not wanting me in the same house as her. There was times where she was thankful, and there's times that she just was hurting. And so there was times where I wasn't fighting back with her. I wouldn't be in that same toxic person, but I was still eating it. I was having to eat what I had done. And so there was times I was pretty low, and those temptations were there, but I never felt the desire to act on it. As soon as that question was posed, and as soon as I changed my mindset, I never felt the desire to act on it. It was just lingering. There was moments to where I took my all my guns and my ammo and even medication, because at the time I was still using some medication, and I'd ration a week's worth, and I'd have my son have the key and hide the key from me. There was times like that.
I was going to say, don't give your guns and ammo to Tim. You'll never get it back.
Yeah. I just didn't trust myself.
Hoarder.
And I was just yeah, exactly. What's he do with all those things?
Takes pictures of it for social media.
Yeah, exactly.
Damn it, Tim. Guy's got more nozzle or ammo than anybody I've ever seen in my life.
I know. Yeah.
Was your wife a spiritual woman?
She was. She always was a pretty strong person of faith. But when we separated, my response was taking that fight becoming a bachelor. Her response was going to the church. And so she would say she went in a new church. One, she just wanted to be around real positive people. And she said she would go in, like, not just on Sundays, but like throughout the week, and just pray for me. And obviously, like, you might wonder, like, what she would be praying for me when I was a complete degenerate, seeing other women and stuff. And she said she would just pray, like, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad, and let me love Chad the way you love Chad. Let me forgive Chad the way you forgave Chad. So she was like really fighting for me on a spiritual front that, when I had given up on us.
It's not impossible for people to get lost, man, as you know. I mean, we've all seen it, and to a degree, I think we've all experienced it. If you can find somebody that is your ride or die and is willing to, and what I'm about to say is probably one of the hardest tasks ever, but be willing to navigate that terrain with you, the ups and the downs, or forgive you for being less than you would want to be as a person. That's a special person.
Yeah.
Easy to say what I just said. Extremely hard to live. Yeah.
I mean, like, you've been around, like, all these deployments and stuff like that. We were to think that she married me at 18 years old and did all those deployments, all those schools, all those trainings, all those workups. And then when I take a fight, like, when you take a big professional fight, the family's in the back burner. Like, and she's done that all those times, and she's still there.
Talk to me about saving our allies.
Yeah. So, I mean,
why do they need saving, Chad?
Well, because our government abandoned them is the short answer. Yeah, our government did not do the right thing. Yeah. And but what's amazing about that is when our government didn't do the right thing, good people, and I don't mean just me and our group, like good people from. And mostly Americans stood up and did the right thing in spite of it.
And so we're talking about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, even though we could spin that conversation into a variety of different tentacles. I get asked this one. I was not surprised that we left at some point because they had been talking about it. Yep. I guess the thing that surprised me the most was the velocity with which the Taliban was able to just tsunami.
Right.
Again, not surprised by the result. Where do you think... Or if you had been the person, with your hand on the steering wheel, where would you have changed the decision? I know you write in your book, like, for one, don't announce that this is the date that we're going to be gone by.
Right.
I guess I'm curious, as they saw it going to shit, I don't understand why they didn't change right there. Because you could always look...
They could have.
Well, because what was said was, well, this is the previous administration's plan. It's like, cool, but you're now the person in the seat with your hands on the wheel.
Right.
Turn the fucking wheel.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why that didn't happen. I'd be fascinated to be in these rooms where decisions were made and how things were explained. But where would you have, if Chad's king for a day, and also driving? We're just combining many metaphors. You're driving the car/boat.
Yeah.
Where would you have changed it? Where would you have left Afghanistan, or at all?
Yeah. So I think the American people had been lied to for a long time to say that we were in this.
The government doesn't lie to us, Chad. All right.
I wish you're
going to get shadow banned.
That was true. They can't do it any more than they have. Yeah. I think I got like 3 active followers now.
Perfect. I'm one of them. It's fantastic.
So they So I think when the American people were lied to was we continually like fled down our throat that we were in this 20-year war, this endless war. America's sons and daughters were dying. President Trump should have declared victory in the end of the war in 2018, because what happened in 2018, where we were no longer in this kinetic combat with the Taliban, we shifted to support and advisory role of the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. And what we did by doing that was we brought in the entire international community in that effort, and everyone was participating. And it was actually this amazing thing that wasn't talked about. It was this international effort that kept global terrorism in the mountains of Afghanistan by supporting and advising the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. And we were doing it in such a way that at one point we only had 2,500 troops there. And for context, what people don't realize is we have 2,500 troops all over the world. Djibouti, Africa, right? We have them all over the world.
Well, you laid out a great example in the book. It's 55,000 in Japan, 35,000 in Germany, 25,000 in South Korea.
Yeah, these are like, this is consistent with military strategy over. So to say when we have these, tens of thousands in places like Japan and World War II and Germany since World War II, and 35,000 or whatever in South Korea since the Korean War, this is like America's successful military strategy to keep contingents in different parts of the world, not to be in war, but to prevent war. And so if you want to prevent us being in long-term wars with Afghanistan, you keep these contingents in place. And we should have declared a war over. We should have announced we were in a support and advisory role. We should have gave Bagram Air Force Base to the international community. And I believe that's what I believe. I'm not defending President Trump here, but I believe that was President Trump's transition out of Afghanistan, was to give Bagram Air Force Base to the international community.
Can you believe we basically tossed the keys and rolled out of that thing? The chess piece that is.
Well, it's the most strategic place in the globe between Iraq, Iran, Russia, and China. And we didn't even consult with. Neither administration consulted with the international community. We didn't consult with NATO. We didn't even consult with the Afghan government that we spent 20 years putting in place. Our White House consulted only with our enemy, the Taliban. And so to think that the Afghan government and the Afghan military could have held up when you take the international community away from them overnight, take away air support, support and advisory roles, it would have been impossible, because the Afghan National Army wasn't left to face the Taliban. They were left to face the Taliban, backed up by Pakistan ISI.
Chad, Pakistan's our ally.
Yeah, I have never seen that to be true, but on paper somewhere it says that, and we give them billions of dollars. I think I write in here about no, they redacted it. But
somewhere in there under a black line, it's there.
Yeah, it's there. But Iran is involved there, and then almost overtly China was. I mean, so the motivation behind leaving Afghanistan had no benefit to the American people, to global security, and to the Afghan people that we spent 20 years building up. The only people that benefited was the Taliban as a terrorist organization, which the Doha Agreement's a joke, because it speaks against, they can't be participants in and support terrorism, but they are terrorists. It supported Pakistan ISI, it supported Iran, and it supported China. China wanted the mineral rights to the Hindu Kush Mountains. We all knew that. I was called conspiracy theorist for saying it, but September 1st, China got the mineral rights, trillions of dollars of lithium mineral rights. And then China is able to now get sanctioned oil from Iran, which, the only thing that stopped them before was the U.S. military in Afghanistan. So our enemies benefited from it. Now Bagram Air Force Base is controlled by China and Iran, who occupy it. And by the way, $85 billion of our equipment were there. So my position to finally answer your question is, we should have never left Afghanistan, particularly in the way we did. We could have announced the war was over and handed Bagram Air Force Base over to the international community and kept a small contingent of 2,000 troops there, like we do in the rest of the world, to participate in international effort to support and advise the Afghan National Army to keep the world a safer place. And instead of doing that, we just decided we're going to do a complete and full withdrawal, hastily, not consulting anyone else but the enemy, and abandon the Afghan people, leave Americans. We left Americans behind. 100%. That's not even debatable. We left Americans behind there. We left our allies behind there. We left billions of dollars of equipment. And the reason that we did it that way is because the White House, and again, I don't agree with the withdrawal, but the way they did it was they gave a time frame. We're going to leave by this date, almost like a celebratory thing, which I don't understand how you would celebrate on the anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
But we gave this time frame, and then we even backed it up to August 31st. Instead of terms. And I think that would have been the difference between the two administrations. Instead of a date, you need to give terms. And again, I don't agree with your withdrawal, but if you are going to withdraw, we're going to say, we will leave when we get every American out. We will leave when we get all of our allies out. We'll leave when we get all our equipment out. We will leave when we're done doing what we're going to do. And if you're getting away, then we're not leaving. And that would have been the way a strong commander-in-chief would have handled that. But because he didn't, we moved our military out, closed our base down before we moved American civilians out, before we moved our allies out, and before we moved our equipment out, did it backwards. That allowed the Afghan National Army to crumble, and it also allowed the Taliban to be able to take 35 provinces and close in around Kabul, which forced our embassy to have to literally evacuate.
From the roof.
And then we're telling American citizens to go to the airport. They can't go to the airport. I mean, they're watching our embassy fly off the roof. And then the NEO operation, non-combatant evacuation operation, was given from the DOD, which is where it belongs, so that's their job, to the State Department, which is a diplomatic organization that's negotiating with the Taliban, and they treated the H-Kaya airport like an embassy, meaning they used the military to secure it, but not be able to go outside and actually conduct evacuations and operations. And so now you're telling American civilians, like, if you want to leave, all you have to do is go, and they're telling the American people, well, they don't want to leave because they're not going to the airport. The outer perimeter was given to the Taliban, and anybody that understands ground combat, whoever controls the outer perimeter controls that ground space. They control who gets
That's
to and
just
from
like
that
your
ground space.
opinion, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
There's
like,
no way they could squeeze it like a noose and cut everybody off. It's not possible.
Imagine being like some 20-year-old girl, American girl that wanted to go there and help. She wanted to go teach women's, like maybe a missionary trip, or teach medical, or teach in the schools, teach these young girls in the school. And now she's stuck there. She has a blue passport.
Yeah.
And she's told by our White House that she has to go through the Taliban checkpoint and show her blue passport to this Taliban caveman with AK-47. Meanwhile, they're shooting people in the streets and cutting people's arms off in the streets. I mean, why would she not?
That's a heavy ask.
Yeah, that's a heavy ask. Yeah, I wouldn't do it. I mean,
if you were a betting man, fast forward 10 years in Afghanistan, what do you think it looks like? And what do you think the consequences are?
what's going to be,
or 5 or 10 years, either way.
It's going to be nonstop civil war because the Taliban doesn't agree with itself. I mean, they're going to be fractions, and they're all going to struggle. They're all going to fight for power. The only thing that's going to keep stability into it is our enemies. China and Iran and Pakistan. I don't know which one's going to end up being the bigger player, but one of those will be the bigger player and actually control that country by proxy. And whoever's probably most loyal to them is going to be who they prop up to be in charge. But the Taliban it'll be in constant civil war, and the people that are going to struggle are going to be the people of Afghanistan who are going to starve, and then 20 million women are immediately sexually enslaved because you see them. 9-year-old girls are already being sold off to Taliban warfighters as brides. Women's rights are gone. They're already back to Sharia law. They have to cover themselves. They're not allowed to be educated. They're not allowed to see medical doctors that are males, but they're not allowed to have female doctors. So there's no women's health care now. So you're going to see that continue to spiral, and there's just going to be constant infighting amongst the sects of the Taliban, and of course you're going to have resistance fighters, and Ahmad Massoud's son still in the Panjshir Valley, leading up the resistance there, he's holding as a stronghold. So there's going to be constant fighting, but I think whoever's going to control it is going to be, and I'm thinking China. I think China and probably Pakistan ISI together. Pakistan ISI won't outwardly do it. China probably will, and it's whoever's going to be most loyal to them and give them the most access is who they're going to prop up as the government leader.
So hard to sit here and listen to and imagine that picture, given all of the blood, sweat, tears, time, sweat, flesh equity that was put into that country. Well,
I mean, and you think from an international security perspective, or global, or the national security of the United States, like many generals right now are predicting a war with China by 2025.
Why was it 2025? I had seen that headline come across. I didn't really dig into it too much.
I think they're just looking at the timeline of as we exhaust our surplus and billions of dollars into Ukraine, China's going to wait it out, and then they'll take time. They'll wait it out probably another year or two, and then they'll go over and take Taiwan when we were at a weak point and can't and won't, maybe can't isn't the right word, won't do anything about it, and then if we do anything about it, then that'll push us into a war in Southeast Asia.
How do you think that would play out?
I don't know.
I have almost no answers on China. People ask me about this, and I try to listen to. Or look for answers and information or people that are smarter than me, which is super easy because that's everybody. I
don't see an invasion. Like I don't see a December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. I don't see that. I see Well,
there's a couple things. One, I think China's biggest threat to itself is actually China right now. They totally screwed themselves with the one child per family maximum. Yep. So in the long term, their population is going to be going off a cliff. I'm not saying we couldn't enter into a kinetic war before that. And so they. I don't know what the hell the balloon was that just flew over this Montana. Yeah. I didn't see it either, even though I made a post that they were spying on the coffee shop. Post did great, actually.
There's 5 or 4 now. Five.
There probably are. Here's my question: do you have to worry that much about a country that has to use a hot air balloon to see what you're doing?
Yeah.
Because and here's another point that I think and I bring this up every time I talk about this. They fly a balloon over our country, and borders should be recognized. Like I totally get all that. Mm-hmm. We fly fucking satellites over their country every day. We're taking a look at them too. We don't have to rely on hot air balloon technology. So I think we're doing okay in comparison. I have no idea how a war would play out. I don't want to see a war play out. And I don't want to see people scared shitless about a potential war because in my experience, if you can get people scared and pointed in a certain direction, there's a lot of maneuvering that's going on behind the scenes, right? Yep. And that's what concerns me more. Oh my God, look what's going to happen. But meanwhile, they're just doing other stuff that we're not even paying attention to. And by that, I mean our own government.
For sure, yeah. I think the biggest concerns isn't, guns and bullets. I think the biggest concerns is economically what China has control. For example, our pharmaceuticals, 90% of our, I think that's the number, 90% of our pharmaceuticals are manufactured in China. I mean, they cut that off. Like
it's a problem.
We're in trouble, right? So those are kind of things that really I get concerned about. But I don't think America should live scared.
Nothing good comes from it. People don't think rationally when they're scared. It's a tactic as old as time.
I wanted to I lost my train of thought. I want to go back to that strong, like, by giving up Bagram Air Force Base, like if we would not have given that up and had that position, like that puts China against the wall a little bit more because we have a close proximity. Now we really don't have anything outside of a floating ship,
No, we gave him a great chess piece.
Yeah.
A very, very strong chess piece on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any answers to that one either, and I don't know why people ask me my strategic level thoughts on China.
Yeah, it's certainly complex, and I mean, there's no crystal ball in any of this stuff. Like
the biggest thing that pisses me off about China was the realization recently that there was no General Tsao because his chicken's amazing, and it's not even. It's like, son of a bitch, I was fooled. That's about the depth of my knowledge and understanding of geopolitical conflicts like that.
But for me, like, I was like, obviously all this stuff interests me, bothers me, but I couldn't do anything about that. But one thing I could do something about was Aziz.
I was going to say, how did you get Aziz out?
Yeah, I mean, so like I was watching President Biden make these decisions, and then Aziz is calling me and saying, "Hey, Bashir's in Kabul. I'm scared, so we're moving him. Like we're trying to come up with plans to get him out. And his SIV process had been in place for 6 years.
Define that process, if you will, and what it means.
So SIV is a special immigrant visa process. So those who served as combat interpreters or served contractually with the United States government in a combatant role would be eligible for a special immigrant visa, which in 2009 we stated that it would only, if they fulfilled their contract with the U.S. military, it would only take them 9 months. But most people had been in this endless DMV nightmare
of years, right?
Of years, yeah. Aziz was in it for six years, and you can imagine, like, he did 15 years with with Tier 1 Special Operations. He had, hundreds of documented combat missions. The one thing he didn't have was he didn't have a traditional contract number because he was in a classified program. So a lot of these guys, so they were like, it was this red, it's always like something, it's like when you go to DMV, like I said, you go something, oh, you're missing you're
99% done. Yeah. And there's this one thing that you can't control or maybe not even be able to get, and they'll stop you dead in your tracks. And
that was his case. And I know people in Congress, I know people saying we couldn't pull this off. And so I'm like, we're going to have to physically go get Aziz out of Afghanistan. And I remember telling my wife, like I am here right now, and you have a husband, and these kids have a dad because of Aziz. Like, we cannot leave him there. He's family. And I remember when Hunter went to Afghanistan, and he's like, hey, Uncle Aziz is here for him. And it gave me a little bit of comfort. Like, man, if he ever gets rolled up or something like that out there, like, I'm calling Aziz. Like, and so I decided to, put together a small team of people, which eventually came to 12 guys. One of the people was Tim Kennedy.
I call him Timothy.
Timothy.
Just to piss him off. I was talking to him the other day. He's coming up for the grand opening. And every time, hello, Timothy. It's Tim. I'm like, I know what it is. And I also wouldn't say this to your face.
He kind of looks like a Timothy.
Yeah, because he can get his hands on me. I've rolled with him one time.
He mauled me the other day. We rolled the other day.
I was going to say, what's the secret to beating him? I know what it is.
For me, it would be gain 100 pounds.
Just pay Gordon Ryan.
Yeah, exactly.
I asked him, we were having dinner at his house, and I said, because he was talking about it, I said, what is it like for you rolling with Gordon Ryan? He goes, it's embarrassing. Yeah. And I said, for you or for him? And he just started laughing. He goes, that dude can do whatever to me he wants to, which I have a hard time fathoming.
Yeah, Tim's a monster, man.
He is a monster. He actually changed for me my perspective on what rolling is, just that level of connection and impression. And I think I had just gotten my blue belt. Super kind, never malicious, but eye-opening, like, oh, that's possible. You're telling me there's somebody else that can do that to him? Hard pass.
usually, like, I'm not a big guy, but I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time. So
you got to use your little guy tricks.
Yeah,
you got to get underneath him.
And man, with Tim, I've rolled with him before, but since he's been out of fighting and put on all that muscle, like man, he's not only big and incredibly, like, pound for pound strong, but he's got that same level of technique that I have.
He's been grappling since he was a child too.
Yeah.
They're just it's as if you are you're having a conversation, but the question he's currently asking you, he's actually already 4 ahead.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of funneling you wherever you want to go because you think you're in control, and he's just sitting back there. Fuck you, Tim. I love you, though.
Yeah.
All right, so he was on your team of 12.
Yeah, so we put this team together, and as we were planning to go get Aziz, his wife and 6 kids, kind of a very clean cut, straight shot mission. One of the guys, we had mainly Green Berets, a few Force Recon guys. We had some guys from Ground Branch paramilitary. For those that don't know, Ground Branch are CIA paramilitary unit. Which, so we had some solid guys with a lot of experience doing this, and we were looking around the room and thinking, man, this is a lot of experience and a lot of willingness just to go help one family. And about that time, we were talking about do we expand it out? One of the guys it says, hey. There's these 3,500 orphans that just got left. They're caretakers. Just everybody's bailing, and these kids got left. Let's help them.
What was your initial plan with Aziz? Was it going to be just him and his family? And how were you guys thinking about getting him out?
The original plan was there's a guy named Richard McGinnis that works for Tucker Carlson, the Daily Caller. He was undercover. If you've seen all the footage of undercover footage from Antifa and BLM, that was him. He was undercover journalist, doing that stuff out there.
It's ballsy.
Yeah, he got. It's funny. He got a video he showed me of him getting lit up by the Border Patrol with the pepper guns and stuff. He got shot in the face with a pepper ball. but
there's going to be consequences for going undercover like that.
Yeah. So, but he's a really cool dude, and I've done a lot of media with him for Mighty Oaks, and so I was like, man, he's crazy enough to do this. So my plan was, going back to my AFO days, I'm like, hey, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you guys a real story of the withdrawal, and I'm going to be I'm going to put a team together. We're going to be your security / cultural experts. And Aziz is going to be our cultural advisor. And then we're going to do the whole story. So you'll get your real story. And then we're going to have to debrief it back in Dubai and we're going to bring the Aziz family out that way.
Perfect. And just never return. Round trip ticket, but maybe we won't use the back end.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the plan. And things just escalated too quickly.
Yeah.
But by the way, in credit to the Daily Caller and Tucker Carlson's team, they were like, they're in. So they were all in,
even knowing what it was actually going to be.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, they might have not knew that I was never returned Aziz, but but that's not for them to know. That's on me. And
that's on a need to know basis, sir.
Yeah, I mean, they had a pretty good idea what the whole motivation behind it. But everything went too fast, and we were like, we just got to go get him, and we were just going to get a private plane and fly him out on a private plane, and we were going to get him. Take him to a place outside of the HKI airport, but everything's just progressed too quickly, and so we made this decision based on these orphans that, hey, this is going to be a bigger deal than we thought it was.
You're going to have to scale up.
Let's help as many people as we can. We don't know how we're going to do it, but let's help as many people as we can. Americans, interpreters, their families, vulnerable people groups that would qualify for P1, P2 visas, and so honestly, we all I think everybody somewhat probably people of faith, and I think we all felt this burden on our heart that God was putting on our heart to go help people, and that's why we came with Task Force 6-8, which Isaiah 6-8 here might send me, and we just want to help, and we just are obedient. I think that a burden on our heart, and honestly, I believe we saw what I would say was a miracle after, because a series of events happened in the next 3 days that if any one of these didn't happen, the whole thing would have fell apart. The first being Sarah Verardo, who is one of our team members. She's CEO of Independence Fund. She called some contacts she had at the Joint Chiefs and asked for permission for us as civilians, because we're veterans, but we're civilians, to land aircraft on the HKIA DOD controlled airport, go outside the wire to get people, to bring them back on and fly off, which is in a hard no, it's impossible. They wouldn't allow the military to do that. And somehow in this miraculous sequence of events, they said yes to that. So we were the only civilians allowed to land to do that. Secondly,
I feel like they said yes because they realized that what the U.S. military was tasked with doing was not enough.
It wasn't going to be enough. It wasn't going to be enough.
And so what other options do you have? If the military is not going to do it and you are constrained by boundaries from your boss, what a better way to figure out a way to navigate through those boundaries than outsourcing that to
I think you're right.
NGOs.
I think a lot of good people in our DOD and our government worked knowing that if they asked, the hard answer would be no.
Yeah.
But they did the right thing without asking and asked and did the forgiveness versus permission thing, because they just felt in their heart to do the right thing.
I mean, let's be honest. If you had a heartbeat and a double-digit IQ, you realize that what was going on in Afghanistan with the withdrawal was not correct.
Was not correct, yeah.
The barrier to entry to realizing that was a catastrophe was really, really low. You'd have to try to trip over it.
Yeah, and I think, I think everybody, especially the people on the ground there.
Yeah.
They were
so that was step one.
That was step one. Step two was now we have to have a place to bring people to, because a lot of the heat we got, like social media wise, was like, you guys are going over there getting in the way of the military and bringing people to America. First of all, if you have common sense, to pause for like 1 minute and think about what that says, like those two things are impossible. One, we can't bring people to America because we're not the State Department, so I have no ability to do that. I can bring people out of Afghanistan, but I have to have a legal place to bring them to. And two, we can't get in the way of the military, because you think that the military would allow like civilians to land aircraft and go do evacuations without some kind of coordination. Those are impossible like things to happen, and ridiculous accusations. But
people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, they don't exactly. So one of the things we knew was we have to be able to have a place to bring them, because we can't legally bring them anywhere. They don't have visas, right? The only place you can bring people without visas is which is human trafficking, is Laredo, Texas, right? You could cross there, but in the real world, like everywhere else in the world, like you have to have visas to move people across borders or permission. So we contacted the royal family. We had two team members that had contacted the royal family. We were able to solicit a phone call. We did this conference call. It lasted about an hour, and they were just quiet. So we were thinking like,
yeah, that's a tough audience. Yeah, tough room.
Yeah, you guys are crazy. Like we can't help you. But at the end, they were like, what do you need? Like, we will, if you bring them here, we'll give you our humanitarian center, doctors, caretakers, food, housing. They rolled out the red carpet and they said, just bring them here. And then they said, in addition to that, we'll give you a C-17 aircraft and pilots. And if you fill it up, we'll give you another one. And so that was another impossibility. And the third thing was like, now we're going to need even more aircraft. And so, but we don't have no money for this. Is like millions of dollars operation that we're just going to lean forward and do, and everything's going to come. And so Glenn Beck, who's, most people know Glenn Beck from radio. Glenn Beck called me up and said, this is like day 3. He calls me up and says, hey, I just got into radio because I wanted to do something, and I got behind a microphone, which is the only thing I could do. And I thought I'd raise a few $1,000s, but in 3 days I raised $21 million. Overall, he raised $46 million.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. He's like, what do I do with it? And I'm like, I need you to start chartering flights. So he put me in touch with a guy named Rudy Atala, who works for him at Mercury One, which is his charity. Mm-hmm. And they chartered most of the flights that we used. And so that launched the operation, and we went there. We set up operations center in Washington, D.C. to intake applicants, the people that would, I say applicants, people that wanted to get out through us. We set up an operations center, a JOC in Abu Dhabi, which is where the airport we were flying people to and where the humanitarian center was. Myself and a guy named Dan Stenson and a guy named Joe Robert, we kind of set up operations there, and we're building like these target rescue package lists and then coordinating them with our ground team. And then we had a ground team out at HKIA to go outside the wire and get people and do the link ups and the bona fides to make sure they're the right people, and then get them back in the gate and get them manifest in an aircraft, get that manifest approved by the Joint Chief, fly them to Abu Dhabi. And so all that happened at like warp speed. And it was like, it was incredible. And everyone like worked 24/7. If you stopped for 5 minutes, whether you're in a ground team or in one of these operation centers, you felt like you were trading like 5 minutes of sleep for someone's life.
Well, like describe how people were reaching out to you too, because you talk about it in the book. It's like DMs on your social media, DMs to people that people think know you on social media, emails, like the volume of information or requests that you were receiving had to have been like
in the tens of thousands.
Yeah, like it's trying to fight off a tidal wave with a thimble.
Yeah, and so it was just like everywhere. Everybody, once word got out, it was like wildfire. And big credit to the veterans community. There was an estimate that 70% of the veterans community were participating in some way in the evacuations, which I don't know if that's an accurate number or not. I just read that, but that's incredible. And everyone was participating on WhatsApp, Signal, like coordinating, like, hey, my interpreter knows this person, they were moving people. And so we were getting so much information that the operations center in Washington, D.C. was like, that's all they did. I didn't read anything. We just forwarded it to them, sift through this. And so they had a whole team of volunteers, these amazing ladies in there, just like sorting through this, making sure what was real. Cause obviously you got like 50% of it is BS, people just trying to get out because they're desperate, and 50% of it is people that really have like a P1 application, an SIV application. They're legit, and so the vet through that and then forward us. That way in Abu Dhabi, all we got was the real stuff. And so, okay, these already made it through our one vetting process. Now we know these are real, like viable people to evacuate. Where are they? What paperwork do we have? Let's set up a link up and a bona fides process to be able to show our ground team this is legit, and get them back inside the wire. And then all that once they got inside the wire, then all that had to go back to the operations center in DC, and Sarah and her team would get it the manifest to the Joint Chiefs to get a thumbs up. Even though we weren't bringing them to the States, we're bringing them to Abu Dhabi. They still want it because it was DOD controlled airport. They wanted to make sure they were sending away people that Now our flights did that. The DOD flights did not have to do that. They flew mass amounts of people that we don't even know who they were. No hit on our military. They were just doing what they were told. They were flying mass amounts of people straight to the United States with no vetting.
Yeah, the hit is not on the military doing what they're told. The hit on that one, or the criticism on that one, is on the people who made the decision to do that.
Yep. And that was for optics, sheerly for optics.
And that's wild, to open up the back of a C-17 and fill it full of, again, the question I asked you about the person who eventually flipped and provided all the information on you. Was that always his plan, or was that strategic? Because what a great plan, knowing that the Americans are going to open up the back of their military aircraft and fill them to the gills. Yeah. Why don't you hop on there, Bob, even though his name probably wouldn't be Bob. No. Probably be Muhammad of some kind.
Bashir, Muhammad.
That's...
And then when they got to the States, they were not required to stay on those facilities they brought. They were able to walk off.
The consequences of that potentially could be very long for us to reap.
Yeah. And you're talking about 100,000 people.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
How was it? Even on that topic, one of the gnarliest videos that I saw, and you mentioned it in the book, is the people falling off the C-17s.
Yeah.
That's a tough one to scrub from the memory bank.
You know what was worse than that, though, and I do write about this in the book, is the moms that had babies
handing the children over.
And they were crowd surfing. Imagine being a mom, like kissing your baby goodbye, knowing you're never going to see it again, but it has a better chance than being left to becoming a sex slave of the Taliban or a brainwashed Taliban. So they kiss these babies goodbye, crowd surf them, tens of thousands people getting trampled to death, tens of thousands of people. Then they get to the wall, somebody throws it as hard and high as they can over, and then what they didn't know was on the other side there's like 6 feet high and 20 feet deep of concertina wire, which when your concertina wire is crimped, you can't undo it. So babies are landing in this concertina wire. My buddy Joe Roberts counted 6 babies that had bled out in that wire.
And for people listening who don't know what concertina wire is, think of it as razor blades on a metal cable that is it's circular in nature generally. I mean, I guess you could stretch it to be taut, but it cuts. It's designed to cut.
It's designed to cut,
and it works. Yeah.
Once it's crimped together, you're not getting in there to get a baby out.
No, you're not. You would actually you probably.
It was like 90 degrees out. It was hot out, and everybody's dehydrated by the time they get there anyway.
What do you think the response would be from the American public if they had shown something like that?
Yeah.
Do you think it would have changed? Do you think it would have spurred more action? Do you think people would have paid attention to it? I hope that they would have.
I hope so too, but the problem with social media and stuff like that now is people are so desensitized to stuff.
That's a good point.
They just move on so quickly. I mean, imagine, that we just see it's like another Instagram video and you move on.
Yeah.
And it's emotional at the moment, but people move on too quickly. I mean, even those planes, right? People are like, "Oh, that was terrible. That's that person was crazy for doing." No, that was desperation. That was like desperation.
Crazy is not the right term. They were looking for any way possible to leave that country.
Yeah, that was like just sheer panic, right? I mean, what's I remember the definition of panic: the sudden, overwhelming terror that destroys a person's capacity for self-help. Like
that is pretty goddamn accurate.
Yeah.
So what was it like for your team on the ground, getting out, collecting people, and getting them on those aircraft?
So Seaspray, who led the ground effort, he and I work together a lot now in Ukraine. But he lost 37 pounds in 10 days. So that's to me that's the best depiction I could give you. Like Tim spent a few days on the ground team. Timothy spent a few days on the ground team. This guy Sean G. And Seaspray were the main guys doing that. And actually Aziz was I was coordinating with, we were trying to get Aziz. It was 8th attempt to get to the airport. I was trying to coordinate. Aziz ended up on the opposite side of the airport as Sean G. So we actually called the Air Force pararescue team and asked them, hey, will you go outside the wire and grab Aziz? So he went outside the wire, grabbed Aziz, got him back in. So that 10 days of doing that nonstop, we had no idea how many people we got, but it ended when the ab gate blew up. I remember Tim had just left that gate, so I was like, Timothy had just left that gate, and I was like, Timothy, you okay? And now I was like really worried, like we were like, man, is everybody okay? And when the ab gate blew up, 13 of our service members were killed, 11 Marines and a sailor and a soldier. And
was that a V-bid or was that just a vest?
V-bid.
Yeah, I was going to say it did so much damage. I'd be surprised if a vest could do that much.
Yeah, and I mean, you had another 160 civilian casualties, 160 or 70 civilian casualties, and about another 200 people injured. So I mean, and you think like they were like, oh, that was ISIS. Like, no, it was all the Taliban. In fact, the Taliban controlled that outer perimeter, so they let them inside to do that, and it was definitely calculated. And it was bound to happen. I'm surprised it didn't happen worse. I'm surprised somebody didn't shoot an aircraft down from a man pad.
That's a true story.
But I was waiting for that to happen. But when that happened, military welded the gate shut. The evacuations, as we knew it was at the airport, was over. And at that time, the military was being forced to leave, but we knew like we couldn't leave. The news was saying there was 100 Americans there, and the White House saying there was 100 Americans left. I was saying there was thousands. The Secretary of State, Secretary Blinken, had said there was 16,000, and then we evacuated 6,000, and now there's 100 left. I'm not that great at math, but I'm better than that, right?
We got to run it by Glover. He's my quantitative.
Yeah,
he checks all my math.
But I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It didn't matter if I was right or they were. They were right. 100 could have been the number, right? 1 is too many. You don't leave Americans behind like that. The president even announced we're not going to leave anybody behind. I do believe there were thousands, but again, you don't leave one. We like where you come from. Like you literally scorched earth to go get America. Even some traitor like Bo Bergdahl.
You will accept more risk than on any other military operation in the hopes that you could save somebody else.
Yeah, and for us to leave like that, we just couldn't do it, and so we chose to stay. We did 2 more months of flying people out of Mazar Sharif, in a cumulative effort of a lot of great NGOs, Task Force Argo. There was just so many other, Mercury One, Samaritans. There was so many other NGOs that were working. So we kind of led this cumulative effort and got another 5,000 people out. So we got 17,000 people out total. Again, all started with just going to get Aziz in it. And when that was over, we had realized, like, man, there has to be something else we could do, but the flights were dried up. We couldn't bring people to third-party countries anymore because the State Department had pretty much closed doors to doing that. And so we knew that everybody had moved to the place called the Panjshir Valley. Ahmad Massoud's son. If people don't know who Ahmad Massoud is, Ahmad Massoud was the leader of the Northern Alliance during 9/11.
Yeah, he got assassinated before, 2 days before 9/11.
Brilliantly, I think. But
smart strategic play for Al Qaeda for sure.
Yeah, they knew he would be our ally in a fight after 9/11. So
didn't they pack a video recorder with explosives or something like that?
They did. Yeah, they assassinated right before 9/11 and preemptively destroying our
probably our main connection, or who was going to be leading the fight against Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. Yeah,
it was pretty brilliant. But his son rose up to be the leader of the new Northern Alliance, the Resistance, and it was in Panjshir Valley and still is right now, leading the Resistance. And so all the commandos that we had trained had moved the women and children that could get there, and they were trying to figure out how to cross over the Panjshir River and to get to Tajikistan for safe passage. But, I had been there before, and we were looking at this and saying, man, there's 25,000-foot mountain peaks there. If they get even through those valleys, there could be a 1,000-foot cliff. If they make it to the Panjshir River, most places is Category 5 rapids. Like we were saying earlier, it's ice melt water.
Yeah.
And then not only the Taliban had infested an area to block that escape route, but the Chinese military had deployed their mechanized units, Chinese special operations to protect that border. The Russian military moved in there and had mechanized convoys up to like 50 BMPs and mechanized convoys to prevent people from getting into what they believe Tajikistan to be like Soviet area. So they were protecting the area. Then they had the Tajik border guard. So they had all these like obstacles. So we were like, they can't do it without eyes on the other side. And, that just bread and butter operation for Recon Marines. We were like, hey, we'll go on the other side, send a small 2-man team and build some routes out and pass that information up. And so kind of another kind of crazy miracle story is I I had looked at different guys. In fact, my first choice on that operation was Mike. I reached out to Mike Glover because he always has good GPSs, and
he does have fantastic GPSs and warm weather gear.
Yeah, so I'm like, and so Mike was on we were going to have a 3-man team. It was be myself, Mike, and we were trying to get this guy Dennis Price. The problem with Dennis Price is he had just got off active duty and went to the reserve. So he's like, he had been a JSOC, Army JSOC unit. He Force Recon, multiple time Force Recon team leader years, scout sniper, like really high level scout sniper, like taught British SAS and teaches all over the world. And so he has like real specific skill sets for the type of guy I wanted on this operation. And so it was me, him, and Mike. And I reached out to the CEO of 3rd Force Recon Company, reserve unit that Dennis was in, Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Waller. I've known him. And I said, hey, sir, like, what's the chances of you guys cutting loose Dennis Price to come on this humanitarian mission with me? And he's like, put it in writing. And so I did, and it got approved. Wow. Which is crazy. And so Mike ended up not being able to make it.
Pussy.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. So he ended up not being able to make it, and so but I know it was
not by choice.
Not by choice. He really was like dying to cut. It was just the dates. He had already had some stuff he couldn't get out of. But anyways, we went. Dennis and I went, and man, we went into Tajikistan, and we drove about 12 hours through those mountains, and we spent 10 days on that border. And I've never seen like that like level of like I was expecting. You know, we knew Chinese and Russian was supposed to be there, but like that level of like.
Just
people,
everywhere.
like, protecting that border. And I was like, man, this is going to be more difficult than we thought. We had, like, as we did that 12-hour drive, you're going through the mountains, and of course there's no cell signal. And then you get to the border, and all of a sudden 4 bars pop up on your phone, which isn't because there's a good cell tower out there.
No, it's because there's a portable cell tower out there doing all sorts of reconnaissance.
Yeah, and then we started getting calls from Russians. And so then I turned to airplane mode. And
would you chat with them?
No, I wouldn't answer it. You turn
Как поживается?
Which was right when we turn to airplane mode, it turns back on. And so,
shit! So they were fully interrogating your phones.
So we shut down electronics and went to map and compass. It's good to have old school skills.
Oh, it's crazy how that works, right? Analog is sometimes better than digital.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good to have old school skills. And so we spent 10 days on that border. We did about 90 miles of border reconnaissance, and every night we would literally like we'd find a route and we'd swim across the Panjshir and go on the other side. Been doing what's called fording reps. Fording rep is like how to cross a waterway. Yeah. And so we were able to nail out about 6 routes. I mean, like some literally like between like 30 yards. I got some cool videos showing, but like 30 yards of Taliban at some points, and Chinese special operations like gillied out and stuff. It was pretty. And then they had the BMPs all had like spotlights and PKMs and for the river.
There's a reason why all of those people and entities were there. It gives you insight into the value that they think of that terrain. And so then you can start planning, well, why do they have such value of this? Yeah. Why would they want to be there? What's the importance of this at a tactical and operational and strategic level?
Yeah, exactly. the one that clearly our White House overlooked and gave away. And
so you did 10 days of mobile cold plunging.
Yeah. We, and, you know, used to feel like pretty like hardcore for doing these, swimming across these rivers and stuff like that. But now there's like 16-year-old girls jumping in ice baths, and you can't be.
It's tough to keep up with TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
It used to be like a tough guy for getting in cold water, but now it's not a big of a deal. But so it was some incredible stories, but also some heartbreaking stories from that trip. But at the end of the day, there's I think what's important to know is there were good people in our government that wanted that information, and so we were able to, even though they were not allowed. Our intelligence agencies were not allowed to go there and do that. They were tracking us, coordinating with us, speaking to us, and we were able to provide that real-time data to them to be able to provide those route reps and those ford reps, those sit reps to them. And so we were able to give that human intelligence to our government agencies. We provided some of it to some NGOs that were doing some cross-border evacuations, and then we provided it to the commandos in the Panjshir Valley that were moving women and children across. And so we don't know what happened. We know that it was used. Yeah. I can't say to what capacity it was used, but it was definitely super valuable information. So,
well, used now, used later. I mean, there's huge value in that. I want to believe, people talk about the alphabet soup agencies, and it's easy to look at it like what everybody sees about the CIA, right? It's I've seen that building. It's the tile floor that has the huge oval, I guess it would be, and the stars on the wall. But I do believe that there are good people working in all of the alphabet soup organizations, and I do believe, and I hope I should say, that when they are presented with information that they know needs to be actioned and they're being told by a bureaucratic system, you can't do this, that sometimes information can get to the hands that it needs to.
I could tell you from this experience that I could
they do the right thing.
I could validate to you that, and obviously I would never want to get anybody in trouble, but I could validate to you that there's guys in those agencies that took this information and did the right thing with it.
Perfect.
And not even when it was done, like along the way, coordinate with us and giving us support as well. And that's not illegal for them to do that, by the way. Like these 3-letter government intelligence agencies work all the time outside the scope of employees of those agencies. They use American patriots that are out there and have access to places as surrogates to do great work. And so that's not abnormal. It's not illegal for them to do that. But they have to. Sometimes they lean forward and do the right thing and ask questions later. And that's what we've seen with this. So we've seen great American patriots that are in these organizations wanting to do the right thing for their fellow human.
I'm glad to hear that. I know you got a call here in just over 20 minutes, and I want to give you some time to prep for it. Talk to me about Ukraine. What do you got going on over there? Why have you been over there 10 times? Your wife has got to be sick of your shit.
She's so sick of it. She's so sick of it. I had this when we were going in that river operation. I got to say this. My wife was like, why are you going to do this?
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't tell her we're going to swim across the Panjshir River in Afghanistan. I'm like, we're going to go and help. And she's like, I know you're going to swim across the river.
We are not going to swim across the river more than once.
Yeah. She's like, I know you. And but I remember we actually got in an argument on the way to the airport. And
those are some of the funnest.
Yeah. We're about to leave.
Great.
You're probably going to die and never see each other again. But the last thing you do is argue. But she was just like, why are you doing this? Like, what do you have to prove? And you've done enough. Like you did the airport. Aziz is out now. And I couldn't think of what to tell her because I didn't want her to believe like it was a bravado thing because it really wasn't. I don't feel like I've done everything I need to do. Like I don't have anything to prove anymore. I just felt so compelled to go. And I remember just telling her like, imagine if this was like our daughter, because people think here like this couldn't be us, but one day it could. Like what if it was our daughter that would be raped and sexually enslaved the rest of her life? What if it was our sons that be put in madrasas to be brainwashed into being Taliban? Like wouldn't we be praying that someone from the other side of the world would come help us? And I know I would be. And I'm like, I think
everybody would be.
Yeah, somebody over there is praying and hoping that we will show up, even not knowing who we are, to help. And even if we could help one person, like I think we have to do this. And honestly, she's pretty amazing. She was paddled a little bit more, but she got it, and she was supportive and went there, and we did that. And through this Ukraine thing, she was. Right when Ukraine kicked off, Sea Spray was already. We had put him in. He chose to be in place. It was maybe February 15th, with February 24th was invasion. I ended up going meet him there. I was there before March 1st. The invasion was February 24th. And so it was the same thing. It was like, what can we do to help? We have this great team of people now. We have this infrastructure. What can we do to help? And, I think when people think about special operations and what makes special operations special, is you do things that other people can't do.
Or are unwilling to.
Or unwilling to do, right? You do things that if somebody else could do it, then you let them do it. That's same practice in my work environment. Like if I have something else could do, I'm gonna do something they can't. But in special operations, that's really important to think that way, because when we looked at Ukraine, like if we did the same mass evacuations like we did in Afghanistan, well, in Afghanistan, everybody couldn't do that. We could. In Ukraine, anybody could drive a bus across the border, open a door, and people could pile in. And so we immediately recognized that's not what we're going to be most useful for. What can we be most useful for? So originally it was strategic rescues of people who couldn't get out. We rescued some disabled people, rescued some political people that couldn't move. Benjamin Hall, the Fox News reporter, when he was catastrophically wounded, someone from the Pentagon called us, and someone from our premier government intelligence agency called and said, hey, we want to go get him, but we can't cross that border. The military are, you always think there's somebody behind the scenes in the shadows working. No one was allowed to go from our government. And they're like, but you guys can. Will you go get him? And Sea Spray briefed us, and 6 of us, let's go get him. He's got a wife. He's got 2 little girls at home. He's got about 48 hours to live because Ukraine can't take care of him. He's going to die if we don't go get him. And we got him. And then Pierre, the body of his cameraman, 25-year cameraman for Fox. They want us to go back and get him. We were like, no, we're not going back. And Kiev's under attack. we're not going to go back and get a body. And then his wife came, Michelle, and she's like, I want my husband. And we were like, okay, yes, ma'am.
Be right back.
Yeah, we went back and got him. It was, so we did those kind of things. But, we've gotten a lot of slack about Ukraine. Like, why are you guys going there and help? Ukraine's corrupt, Zelensky's corrupt. And I'm like, man, so is Biden. So is every politician since the beginning of time.
I think almost everybody in our political system at this point, even just playing in that pool, I still can't figure out if it's the pool that corrupts you or you go into that occupation because you are corruptible or like you want to do good. So is it people want to do that because they're like, oh, this could be self-serving in the end? Like they have this really weird long-term Machiavellian play, or do they go into it really altruistic and that pool just corrupts you? I can't figure it out because it seems to end in corruption either way.
It always does.
Yeah.
And I got some friends that just got elected and I'm telling them like, don't slide. It's a slippery slope. Careful, you get too close to the edge. But for me, like with something with Ukraine, like all the heat we're taking is like, I'm not going there because I care about Ukraine or Zelensky or supporting those efforts. We care about people. And I think what I've learned through all this is like, we can't lose compassion for people because of partisan politics. Like if, me and Tim were talking about this on his podcast and because I was just getting so aggravated with it. It's like if a baby was choking to death on this table right here, you and I would certainly like, everybody would, right? And if your neighbor's house was burning down, like, would you go in and help?
Well, what political signs are in the front of their house, Chad?
Exactly.
No. Oh, that's funny. You wouldn't even think about that. Yeah.
We wouldn't think
you'd go help your fellow man.
How far away does somebody have to be to lose compassion for people, Yeah. And that's kind of think where we've just lost compassion. Like for me, like these people don't care about Zelensky or Putin. These people were like having ballistic missiles the size of telephone poles fired into their apartment buildings with women and children. I've seen the mass graves. I've been 2 hours past the Russian line and seen mass graves in Ukraine. Like this, what's happened is horrific. And so if we have the ability to help, then we help. And going back to like, the special operations effort, like we looked at it and said, man, we could help with precision rescues. We could get to the front lines where other ministries can't get, that are doing like the welfare for the troops and the mental and spiritual resiliency stuff. We have the ability to get to places where people can't get to because of our expertise and experience. We have the ability to, one of the things we did was we built, and I could talk about it now, at first I couldn't, we built a clandestine communication infrastructure because we knew like if all these NGO efforts, if cell went down, it was over. So we immediately built a clandestine communications infrastructure that everyone tapped into, and we got like, and everyone's using it now. We built that like in the first month. We spent about, it sounds like a lot, but we spent like about $400,000 to build it.
It is a lot.
But, but for the value it brings to the battlefield, like, it's now not only can everybody communicate, but they're all linked together and able to support each other. So we built this early on. So those are kind of things that we did that other people can't do. And now Mighty Oaks Foundation, my international part of Mighty Oaks Foundation, where my son's at right now, is they're taking teams out to those front lines. They're with a special operations unit. They brought some custom made IFACs that we made for them. Yep. And then we don't just bring the medical gear with them. We bring a doctor with us to teach them how to use it. And so they're getting the training, and then they're teaching our mental and spiritual resiliency programs that we do for Mighty Oaks to get them in the right headspace, because these guys, most of them weren't professional warfighters. They're just, even when they're labeled as special forces, they were just super tough and diligent. And and
what do you wish that people knew about Ukraine that's not being reported right now?
Well, I think the main thing I wish people knew about Ukraine that's not being reported is that factual picture of what's happening to civilians there. I don't think the media is reporting like one. I could validate, and I can't say how I could validate, but I know I could validate with 100% certainty, and people just have to take my word for it, that at least 6 different chemical weapons were used in civilian locations with no military place. Like, so chemical weapons were
on
being
civilians.
Used on civilians. 6 different types. I could confirm that. And that 6 different types in 6 different locations of civilians with no military occupation. I've been to towns just outside of Kharkiv where elderly communities, which is hundreds of miles away from any military installation, was leveled to rubble. Like literally like 60-year-old retirement communities, apartment buildings with hundreds of thousands of people, or women and children would have just been left there, leveled with like ballistic missiles, and then airstrikes on civilian apartment buildings that were consistent in every building. The strike point was in the same location. Mass graves. One I leaked it to Fox News, and it was covered. One was 400 people. women and children bound.
Which means they were executed.
Executed, yeah. Probably not at one time, over a period of 6 months that a Zoom was occupied.
Yeah.
And then another one with 1,100 people. So the level of atrocity, these are war crimes that are not being reported, because if they are reported, then NATO or the world would have to do something about it. And so I think people, really, in another one more thing I think people need to know is that people may assume, I think I shocked Mike when I said this, I do not support the billions of dollars that are going there. I'm there. I obviously have a heart for Ukrainian people, but the $111 billion to go there is all complete money laundering corruption. It is not making it to the front lines. There's no congressional oversight over it. It doesn't fix the problem. It only makes the problem worse, because when that money gets in the pockets of people, it disincentivizes ending this. And so, like, why would Zelensky want to end this?
Yeah.
Zelensky doesn't want to end this. He's making more money than he's ever made before. He's becoming one of the world's richest men because of this thing. And in Ukraine, that probably wouldn't be popular talk to say that, but it's just the truth. I'm just speaking the truth. And
well, I don't know if you know this, Chad, but systems that police themselves are definitely not corrupt.
They're not. Yeah,
There's no reason why they would ever be corrupt or have a history of becoming corrupt.
Yeah, exactly. including the Kremlin or now, unfortunately now, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give you time to prep for your call. What do you want to close it out with, man?
I want to close out with this. So, all this stuff is extremely frustrating. If you read Saving Aziz, there's like moments that make you laugh and make you cry and inspire you, but it's also very frustrating. I definitely hope people pick up the book Saving Aziz and read it. And it's on an audiobook, by the way, and I read it on audiobook. So you have to endure me for 6.5 hours.
Only audiobooks I listen to are James Earl Jones. That's all I can do.
I tried to get him to do it for me, but he wouldn't.
That would have been fantastic.
Anthony Hopkins would have been good too. That would have been a second choice.
Damn, that would have been solid.
But yeah, I mean, so you read this stuff and you watch the news and you get frustrated. But the truth is, like, and we've seen it from this, when the governments of the world and all this frustrating stuff happens, like, there's good people that stand up and do good things. And that's one of the things that I got to see in all this. And there's a saying that I heard a long time ago that there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. And I think the world could use a little bit more of just people standing up and doing the right thing, regardless of the return on it. We were just getting interviewed, myself and Seaspray, and about Ukraine, and people were asking, the reporter was asking us, like, why are you out here doing this? You don't know these people. And we said, because it's the right thing to do, which is the easy answer. But then the reporter asked Seaspray this question I never heard before. She said, is it worth it? And he said the perfect answer. He said, it doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be worth it to do the right thing. And I think oftentimes as Americans, we always look for that. If I invest my time, my money, my energy,
it's
my
always
resources,
math. It's always math. It's a value proposition.
Yeah.
What am I getting out of this?
What am I getting out of it? Or what's the risk, right? What's the risk versus reward? Man, it doesn't have to be worth it to do the right thing. And I think we in this world, especially in the privilege we have of living in this amazing country in America, and the ability we have to help other people, like, it doesn't always have to be worth it to do the right thing. So
it's awesome, man. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, man.